Chapter 366. Suku said worriedly, Langjun, if you encounter difficulties during this trip to the palace. Jiang Pingji was relaxed about it and said nonchalantly, don't worry, it's not that serious. At most we'll just have a chat. In a sense, Jiang Pingji as a hostage was more important than other hostages. As Lu Shi's only son, as long as she was still in Shangjing and under the eyes of the emperor, Lu Shi, the magistrate of Chongzhou, would not dare to disobey. Understanding this, Jiang Pingji was not worried about the trip to Shangyang Palace. Suku understood the reason and his face was as gloomy as ink. Whether it was as a citizen of Dongqing or as Jiang Pingji's right-hand man, he despised the Dongqing emperor's behavior. If the emperor was diligent and loved the people, why would he need to worry about his subordinates obeying him on the surface but disobeying him in secret? She followed the eunuch into the palace, and Jiang Pingji waited outside the palace to be summoned. Just as Jiang Pingji thought, the emperor only took some time to meet her. He chatted for a while, reminisced about his and Lu Shi's friendship, and warmly invited her to stay in Shangjing for a while. Then he rewarded her with a table of delicacies. The whole process lasted less than an hour. Jiang Pingji did not waste the opportunity. She started a semi-interactive live stream. The title was Half-Day Tour of Shangyang Palace. Ingyang Kuaixian. I feel that the architecture of Shangyang Palace has some characteristics of the Qin and Han dynasties, but some places are filled with the style of the Tang dynasty. Well, no matter what, the ancient palace is indeed a treasure of human cultural heritage. It's not something a normal film city can compare to. Zhengwo Buqingjing, please, this is the real royal palace. If the film city was 100% restored, it would have gone bankrupt long ago. It's good enough to make an imitation for you to see. Why are you so picky? If you want to see the palace, go to the Forbidden City. Kojiao Qi fan, it's the Forbidden City. It's been in disrepair for years. There aren't many places on display and there are so many tourists every day. Many places look like dilapidated buildings. Traveling during the Golden Week, every time I visit the Forbidden City, I always feel that the royal palace is nothing special. Jiang Pingji had been in this era for a few years, but it was the first time she was in such close contact with Shangyang Palace. The audience in the streaming room was even more excited. For their era, everything about the feudal dynasty aroused their curiosity and exploration. Let alone the imperial garden. When I see the emperor of Dongqing, all my hopes for the emperor are shattered, okay? He had thought that he would be able to see a handsome middle-aged man with extraordinary majesty. However, the emperor of Dongqing was just a middle-aged man with heavy eye bags. He did not have the aura of an emperor. He looked wretched, as if his body had been hollowed out. It felt like even the middle-aged men dancing on the street were more energetic than him. Scan code see me. I raised both my hands and feet in agreement. It was one thing to say that he was a middle-aged wretched old man, but when she thought of all the beautiful young ladies in the palace being defiled by him, she suddenly felt disgusted, as if she was eating an apple only to find half a caterpillar's corpse. Luckily the streamer didn't go to a harem fight. Otherwise, the thought of the streamer getting jealous over a lowly man would make me wake up from my dreams. From this, it could be seen that regardless of the era, one's face was still very important. The age, appearance and aura of the emperor of Dongqing did not match the expectations of the audience in the streaming room. As the audience chatted, a completely different style popped up on the bullet screen. Panda Noodle House. Am I the only one who realized that we've been tricked by the streamer? The title of today's streaming was Half-Day Tour of Shangyang Palace. In fact, the streamer only took us to walk a single path. She did not stop to introduce the architectural landscape, and the duration was not even half a day. Not to mention half a day, it was only an hour. Selling dog meat with a sheep's head. When Jiang Pingji saw the bullet screen, she specially posted one and conveniently thanked the viewer. Streamer V. The current situation does not allow me to wander around Shangyang Palace. However, one day I will open another streaming of a one-day tour of Shangyang Palace. When that time comes, I can go wherever I want. The inner court of the palace will be unobstructed. Panda Noodle House. The content of the bullet screen seemed very ordinary, but the audience in the streaming room expressed their horror after thinking about it carefully. She was still a citizen of Dongqing. Due to the majesty of the royal family, she could only follow the eunuch who led the way. It was impossible for her to wander around Shangyang Palace. Then under what circumstances could she ignore this rule and walk around Xiangyang Palace unimpeded? When she became the new master of Xiangyang Palace. Having reached this conclusion, the audience in the streaming room was instantly delighted. They gave Jiang Pingji a lot of gifts and the screen was full of 666. Lao Ciji Lianmeng. Streamer, I give you 101 points. I'm not afraid of you becoming arrogant even if I give you one more point. With the audience in the streaming room joking around, Jiang Pingji left unscathed. As soon as she left the palace, she saw Suke anxiously waiting for her. I'm fine. Let's go back in the carriage. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and ordered the groom to drive. Suke saw that she was calm and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Langjun, did your trip go well? I was praised and ate some food. The royal chef in the palace is not as good as the chef in Wumajun's residence. Jiang Pingji complained. The royal chef's cooking was definitely better than the ordinary chef's, but the food prepared by the royal chef was already cold. How could it be compared to hot food? Suke was speechless. He suddenly could not reply. His Longjuan style was always so fresh and different. However, I can only stay in Shangjing for a while. I can't leave. Jiang Pingji shook her head and said in a low voice, the emperor is addicted to beauty. His body is strong on the outside but weak on the inside. He refuses to rest and needs to use tiger wolf medicine to keep him alive. I'm afraid he has realized that his body is not feeling well and is increasingly afraid of death. Now that he is under house arrest in Shangjing, I'm afraid he is extremely afraid of death. Even if the emperor supported the foreign relatives and the eunuchs to suppress the aristocratic families, he was still raising a tiger that would invite disaster. The aristocratic families seemed to be retreating, but they were not seriously hurt. The so-called aristocratic families all had a deeper and longer history than the royal family of Dongqing. If the emperor suddenly died, who knew if the aristocratic families would retaliate and completely turn the royal family of Dongqing into a puppet? It was probably because of this worry that the emperor gradually recalled the sons of the aristocratic families who were serving outside and used them as hostages. If Jiang Pingji was the emperor of Dongqing, faced with such a situation, she would choose an heir as soon as possible and abdicate the throne to let the dynasty's power take over smoothly. She would grant amnesty to the people and show mercy to the ministers. At the same time, she would cut off the remnants of the foreign relatives and the eunuchs to ensure that the new emperor could sit firmly on the throne. As for the threat of the aristocratic families, she would rope them in and suppress them. She would first stabilize Dongqing, which was riddled with holes. That was the best strategy. However, the current emperor obviously did not want to move. He did not want to abdicate the throne to his son while he was still alive. Chapter 367. Suku frowned worriedly. If what Jiang Pingji said was true, when could they leave Shangjing? Did they have to wait until the emperor passed away and the princes fought it out with Prince Changsho? By that time the world would have already been torn apart. Jiang Pingji sneered as if she saw Suku's worry. We don't have to wait that long. We just have to wait for an opportunity. As long as Huijun got close to the emperor and bewitched him, it would not be difficult for them to leave Shangjing. But Suku was worried. He felt that things were not that simple. Jiang Pingji said, do you think the princes and the ambitious Prince Changsho have the patience to wait for the emperor to pass away? Suku felt as if he was struck by lightning. Something exploded in his mind. Langjun, do you mean to force the emperor to abdicate? I'm not sure. But looking at the short history of the Dongqing royal family, they have a history of murdering their parents and brothers. Jiang Pingji said sarcastically. Other than the founding emperor, the other Dongqing emperors had taken the throne through shady means. The whole world knew about this scandal. The current emperor seemed to be repeating the fate of his ancestors. His younger brother and son were eyeing him covetously. The game depended on who could not wait to make a move first. The bird that sticks out gets shot. Whoever stood out first would be the target. Compared to Suku's impatience, Jiang Pingji was leisurely sitting on the fishing platform. She suddenly thought of something and smiled coldly. Haste makes waste. So what if I'm under house arrest in Shangjing? The emperor doesn't have the guts to make things difficult for the aristocratic families. It's impossible to lock them up for life. We just need an opportunity to leave Shangjing safely. Before that, Xiaoyu, just treat it as a vacation in Shangjing. Don't worry. Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up. Suku smiled bitterly. He felt at ease. Langjun, I'll definitely accompany you to the end. As soon as he finished speaking, the carriage fell into silence again. Jiang Pingji crossed her fingers and looked down. Her cold expression did not show any emotion. After the carriage traveled for a while, she suddenly asked, Xiaoyu, under what circumstances do you think the emperor will summon Prince Changshu to Shangjing? Suku was stunned. He thought about the question and said firmly, that's impossible. Why? Jiang Pingji asked. Suku answered, everyone in the imperial court knows that Prince Changshu has formed cliques to pursue his own interests. Even if the emperor is obsessed with beauties every day and neglects the affairs of the imperial court, he cherishes his life so much. How could he summon this ambitious wolf to the capital? If that's the case, wouldn't that be inviting a wolf into the house? Yeah, I think so too. Jiang Pingji nodded in agreement. She did not see any good points in the emperor, but he had countless flaws. Although the emperor was muddle-headed now, he could kill the former emperor and ascend the throne from King Gongshan of Hejian County. He couldn't be a complete idiot. If he was sane, why would he summon Prince Changshu to the capital at such a critical time? Suku asked her, Langjun, why do you suddenly ask? I suddenly remembered what a friend told me before I left, Jiang Pingji said calmly. After saying that, a figure that was tall and straight like a pine appeared in his mind. Wuxia was not someone who spoke without thinking. Since he asked her to guard against Prince Changshu accepting the edict and bringing troops into the capital, there must be a reason for it. Suka thought about it repeatedly and frowned. If it's true, there might be three possibilities. First, the emperor's favorite candidate is not one of his 4 sons, but the youngest son of the former emperor, Prince Changshu. But thinking about what happened in the past few years, the possibility of this guess is almost zero. Second, if something unforeseen happens in Shangjing, the 100,000 imperial guards will be useless, and the emperor will have no choice but to summon Prince Changshu. However, the probability of the 2 possibilities that Suku mentioned happening was too low. It was almost not within the scope of consideration. What's the third possibility? Suku said, fake the emperor's will. Jiang Pingji's heart skipped a beat. Fake the emperor's will is indeed a way. Shangjing was now a huge cage. Jiang Pingji's ears and eyes were sharp. She acutely noticed that the area where the high officials and nobles lived was filled with a large number of spies. These spies disguised themselves as manservants, maids, or merchants from all walks of life. They were watching them 24 hours a day. When they were close to the mansion, Jiang Pingji glanced at Suku and stopped him from speaking. The two stepped on the bench and got off the carriage one after another. They returned to the mansion with their usual expressions. At that moment, the audience in the streaming room also smelled something unusual. They kept asking questions. Dora Aming, host, can't you leave Shangjing for now? Lao Ciji Lianming, host, they seem to be under house arrest. The Emperor of Dongqing is courting death as long as he is alive. Tudu Feiqiu, I bet 50 cents that according to the host's petty temper, she will definitely find a way to take revenge. Most of the audience were ordinary onlookers. They had no problem watching the show, but when it came to such brain-burning things, their reactions were slower. The audience in the streaming room seemed to have a kind of blind trust in Jiang Pingji. After following the streaming for a few years, they had never seen anyone who could really make Jiang Pingji suffer a loss. Even if it was just a joke. The host was broad-minded and did not take it to heart. Of course, there were many people who objected. Zai Chili Diao, nonsense. Are you all crazy? The host has no scholarly honor now. Even if she has a powerful father, water from afar can't put out the fire at hand. If the emperor of a feudal dynasty wants to lay his hands on her, can she go to heaven? Shinsho Yangtuo, yes, I like this streaming room the most. I can always see hundreds of thousands of idiots praising an ordinary host. Lao Ciji Lianming, I can see that there are indeed many experts in this streaming room. Who still remembers the host skills? Even if she can't fly on roofs and vault over walls, at least she can leave Shangjing safely. It was not a matter of whether she would leave or not, but when she would leave. Jiang Pingji did not care about the bullet screens that were worrying about her or slandering her. When it came to strength, it was all empty talk. Only when it was done would it be real. Although it was house arrest, apart from not being able to leave the city, there was no restriction on her personal freedom. In fact, she was quite happy. After more than half a month, Jiang Pingji and Shangjing's chief patrol officer Huang Song coincidentally met a few times. After a while they became friends. Feng Ju, a mischievous child, came along. The three of them often drank tea and watched dramas. The place where they drank tea and watched dramas was naturally not suitable for children. Feng Jin, who knew about this, was speechless. She leaned against the table leisurely. A row of musicians was playing and singing in the corner of the room. The song was so sweet that it went straight to the heart. Jiang Pingji peeled peanuts and stuffed them into her mouth one by one. Chapter 368. It was already the middle of June. Jiang Pingji had already changed into cool summer clothes. With Lu Huan's wedding as the deadline, Jiang Pingji had stayed in Shangjing for almost a month and a half. The weather is getting hotter and hotter. I've almost visited all of Shangjing. I'm worried about how to spend tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Pingji's complaints, a glint flashed across Feng Ju's eyes, which immediately turned into helplessness. If it were anyone else, they would have long lost their patience. However, Jiang Pingji still ate and drank as she should. She could hold her liquor very well. He did not know what his second brother thought of her. He actually felt that she was better than Bogeo. In terms of eating, drinking, and having fun, Bogeo was indeed inferior to Lu Shi. Compared to Feng Ju's probing from time to time, Huang Song played the role of a fair-weather friend vividly. The three of them gathered together to eat, drink, and have fun. They did not talk about business but only talked about romance. It's okay. We'll go somewhere else tomorrow. Brother Lu, don't worry. I know a lot of good places to go. Huang Song winked at her, looking like an adult who had a tacit understanding. After they got closer, he originally wanted to call Jiang Pingji Brother Shi, but she disliked the way he addressed her. She made him change it. Jiang Pingji held a peanut in her mouth and joked, "If you say this to Huayu, I'll be happy the whole day tomorrow even if I don't go out." After hearing that, Huang Song suddenly looked distressed. "Brother Lu, you can't be like this. I'm doing this for your own good. It's fine if you don't repay my kindness, but why do you have to trick me?" If a brother Khan knew that he brought Feng Ju to indecent places all day long, wouldn't he slap him? Didn't the old master say that food and lust are human nature? This is the pursuit of life. Food with the left hand and lust with the right. Even saints can't avoid this custom, let alone ordinary people. Besides, Huijie is not a 3-year-old child. He only went there for a while and didn't do anything. Second brother Feng is too strict, Huang Song muttered quickly as if he wanted to use this to calm the guilt in his heart. Feng Ju mocked Huang Song for being semi-illiterate. There was nothing wrong with this evaluation. He did instigate Feng Ju to look for an artist, but she had a strict upbringing. It was okay for her to sit and drink and watch the dance, but she refused to do anything that overstepped her boundaries. "Ah, you can explain your fallacious reasoning in front of Huayu." Jiang Pingji sneered. Feng Jin's control over his younger brother was very restrained, but he was secretly flirtatious. Huang Song was getting bolder and bolder. If it weren't for the fact that Wei Jingxian was about to give birth, which had almost squeezed out Feng Jin's mind and left him with no time to care about other things, he might have long discovered that Feng Ju had been abducted by Huang Song to run around and fool around. "Brother Lu, your words hurt my heart." Huang Song's face scrunched up into a ball. It was obvious that he was putting on a show. This person's ability to liven up the atmosphere was not weak. In order to achieve his goals, he did not care about his personal image. When he was playing around, he was very open. Even if all the nobles in Shangjing spoke harshly to him, most of his peers of the same class followed his lead. Jiang Pingji only found out about this after she got to know Huang Song up close. He was very popular. "Where does it hurt?" Jiang Pingji asked with a smile. Huang Song pretended to sigh. "Everywhere. It hurts. My heart is bleeding." Jiang Pingji held back her laughter and teased, "Speaking of glib tongues, among the people I know, you're definitely one of the best." After peeling the peanuts, she looked at the sky outside. The sun was gradually setting and the orange sky was filled with a different kind of beauty. In the words of the audience in the livestream room, it was dusk, the time to meet the devil. After paying, they each got on their horses. Huang Song said, "Brother Ju, Brother Lu, I'll send you to second brother Feng's residence first. Then I'll have to trouble you." The medical officer and the midwife both said that Wei Jingxian was about to give birth in the next 2 days. After hearing the news, Jiang Pingji planned to go and take a look. Feng Jin and his wife were also hostages, who were under house arrest. Their personal freedom was not restricted, but pregnant women were sensitive and thoughtful. They lacked experienced elders to take care of them. It was their first child, so the young couple always felt uneasy. On the way, Jiang Pingji looked at the street and frowned slightly. Something was not right. Seeing the situation, Huang Song asked with concern, "Brother Lu, are you not feeling well?" "No, I just feel that the streets have become much more deserted these 2 days. The stray cats and dogs that are usually seen have disappeared," Huang Song said. "Yes, after being reminded by you, I also feel strange. I suddenly remembered something. 2 days ago, the wolf dog at home was in a strange mood. It scratched the wall all night and howled non-stop in the middle of the night. The old man wanted to kill that beast." Jiang Pingji was startled. "Is that true?" She did not keep any animals with her, so she did not pay much attention to it. "Sai, how can it be fake? When I go back tonight, I might see that beast stewed in a pot." Huang Song quite liked the wolf dog, but unfortunately the old man was the master of the house. There was nothing he could do about it, no matter how much he liked it. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "That's good. There's an extra meal tonight." Huang Song said with a pained heart, "Brother, your words hurt." Feng Ju looked at the two of them chatting and was suddenly speechless. He felt that he was leading two naughty children. Jiang Pingji's heart was somewhat stifled. She vaguely had an ominous feeling. Her mental strength was very strong. In Wuxia terms, the intuition of a martial artist was also stronger than that of an ordinary person. In layman's terms, her intuition was 100 times stronger than that of a beast. "Recently, have you seen any strange things when you patrol the streets?" Huang Song was startled and asked, "What kind of things?" "The stray cats and dogs on the streets, the snakes, insects, rats, ants and cockroaches in the corners. Are there any abnormal behaviors?" Where Jiang Pingji lived, she could not even see snakes, insects, rats, ants or cockroaches, let alone stray cats and dogs. As the patrol officer of Shangjing, even if Huang Song was only the head of the urban management, he often wandered outside. He must have seen more than her. Feng Ju smelled something unusual and frowned. Huang Song thought carefully and said, "There are. Anyway, I've seen fewer and fewer stray cats and dogs recently. This is normal. Anyway, many people will secretly catch them to eat with wine. It's a hot season now. It's normal that cats and dogs do not like to come out." Huang Song's explanation seemed very reasonable, but Jiang Pingji's heart beat wildly. A dark cloud lingered in her heart that could not be dispelled. "What's wrong, Brother Lu?" Huang Song asked. "Nothing. It's probably because the summer heat has been severe recently. I'm always feeling stuffy. I feel that something bad will happen." "What bad thing?" "The weather has been dry recently. It hasn't rained for a month. As the patrol officer of Shangjing, you have to be careful lest something catches fire. Most of the buildings nowadays were made of wood. If they caught fire, it would be difficult to put them out." Jiang Pingji warned, "It's not impossible." Huang Song did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Brother Lu, you should be more considerate of me. If it really catches fire, you'll lose your lowly position as the patrol officer of Shangjing. If you don't want to lose your position, you'll have to put in more effort." Huang Song heard what she said and felt that it made sense. Even if Jiang Pingji's words were not pleasant to hear, she had good intentions. The current Huang Song wholeheartedly served the people. He came from a humble background, but he had the heart to help the world and save the people. He was usually sloppy, but when he was enforcing the law, he was upright and outspoken. He could be said to love the people as if they were his own children. It had to be said that it was not without reason that Feng Ju saw him in a different light. Chapter 369. The three of them arrived at Feng Jin's residence. Jiang Pingji saw Feng Jin, whom she had not seen for a few days. She was shocked by his dark eyes. "Huayu, how many days have you not slept?" 3 or 4 days. Feng Jin smelled alcohol and cosmetics on them. He was too tired to pursue the matter. Jiang Pingji complained, 3 or 4 days without sleep? Are you preparing to become a celestial being? Jiang Pingji learned about the joke from the audience in the streaming room. Feng Jin rubbed his brows to wake himself up. He did not have the energy to pursue the matter. Jingxian's stomach has been hurting for the past few days. She went to the delivery room a few times, but she came out again. It was getting more and more troublesome each time. He was so worried that he could not sleep. The child was purposely tormenting his inexperienced parents. Feng Jin had been tormented by his wife since she was pregnant. He could understand the difficulties of being a parent more and more. According to the customs of the ancient times, The father only needed to sow the seeds, wait for 10 months and take over the child from the midwife. When Feng Jin and his wife were under house arrest, Zhou Xian was discovered to be pregnant. Many things could only be solved by the husband and wife. The more he was involved, the more he felt a sense of security as a father. What about now? Feng Jin said, the midwife made some ginseng chicken soup. She's drinking it now. I asked Taxi to send some good old ginseng. I heard it's good for pregnant women. Feng Jin nodded. He had seen the old ginseng. Its age and medicinal properties were excellent. It was prepared for labor. Perhaps because he had not slept for a few days, his brain was a little slow. He only reacted after a while. Lanting, why are you here today? After Taxi sent the old ginseng, she went back and told me that Zhou Xian is going to give birth in 2 days. I was worried that you were short of hands, so I volunteered to make up the numbers. Jiang Pingji often visited Feng Jin's house during her stay in Shangjing. She was familiar with his servant. She asked the servant to make a pot of refreshing hot tea as soon as she entered the house. Drink some tea to wake up your mind. Don't fall asleep. Feng Jin thanked her tiredly. Thank you. He had been tense for the past few days, afraid that while he was dozing off, the other side would make a move. He was so nervous that he didn't dare to sleep for even a moment. With Jiang Pingji's arrival, he felt much more at ease and gradually felt sleepy. You and I are best friends. There's no need to thank me. Not long after, a series of painful cries came from inside the room. The maidservants and the midwife were running around in circles, and then there was no more sound. It was another false alarm. Feng Ju also waited for 4 hours. The moon was high in the sky, but there was still no movement in the delivery room. As the father, Feng Jin was tormented. Wei Jingxian, who was pregnant and giving birth, was also exhausted. She was sweating profusely and her face was pale. The maidservant kept wiping her sweat with a damp cloth. The midwife checked and said that it was not the right time yet. She could rest for a while. Usually, it would take 6 to 10 hours for a pregnant woman's first child to be born smoothly. If it was a little more difficult, it might even take 3 to 5 days. 3 to 5 days. Feng Jin almost fainted when he heard the time. The midwife looked at him strangely. She had delivered countless children, but she had never seen a man as nervous as him. When it was midnight, Jiang Pingji asked Feng Jin to take a nap first. With her and Feng Ju watching over the place, there would be no problems. When Feng Ju heard this, he looked at her with a strange expression. If he did not investigate wrongly, the person in front of him seemed to be his second sister-in-law's ex-fiancé. How could his second brother be at ease? However, Feng Jin's reaction made his eyeballs almost pop out of their sockets. "Hey, Lanting is here. Jin can rest assured. If it starts, wake me up." Feng Jin was already so sleepy that he couldn't stand it anymore. His mind was a little groggy. He asked the servant to bring a set of bedding and directly rolled it over his body. He leaned against the pillar and took a nap. Not long after, he fell into a deep sleep. Feng Ju was speechless. Not long after, Wei Jingxian's cries of pain came from the delivery room. In order to save energy, she gritted her teeth. Her voice sounded very muffled. Women in ancient times giving birth. It's really scary. Jiang Pingji had sharp ears and eyes. She heard the movements very clearly. Her heart could not help but tremble. The methods of reproduction in ancient times were so backward that it made her hair stand on end. They could even be sentenced in the Federation. She spoke softly, so Feng Ju did not hear her clearly. He only heard her lament that giving birth was not easy. "Don't all women have to go through this?" he said matter-of-factly. Jiang Pingji glared at him. There was a look of disdain in her eyes that made him scratch his head in confusion. She secretly poked the system and said in her heart, "I guess I'll have to stay up late tonight. If I'm bored, I'll start a live stream." The system did not reply. It just silently started the live stream. It was estimated that it was also night time at the other end of the live stream. After a full 10 seconds, the number of people in the live stream room reached the upper limit of 150,000. Host V, it's boring at night. Let's chat to kill time. It was midnight. At the other end of the live stream room, it was only 12 o'clock at night. Nightlife had just begun. The people in ancient times did not have so much entertainment. The lighting equipment was only outdated oil lamps. To save money, they had long gone back to bed and fell into a sweet dream. At the same time, A short and frightened cry broke the silence of the night. Not long after, a spark lit up and lit the wick in the lantern. The rustling of clothes and the sound of steady footsteps came from afar. The light in the lantern was getting closer and closer. Xianxia, what happened? Outside the house, a young man wearing a single garment and a cloak asked with concern. After a few breaths, there was a faint movement in the room. When the candle was lit, the closed door was opened, revealing a delicate and perfect face that was pale and frightened. I'm fine. There was a thin layer of sweat on Wuxia's forehead. He was panting as he spoke. I was just frightened by the nightmare. The young man slept in the room next to Wuxia. Nightmare? The young man asked curiously, what did you dream of? He was really curious. What kind of dream could scare Wuxia like this? It was as if he had lost his soul. Wuxia pursed his lips. After a long time he said in a hoarse voice, I dreamed that there was an earthquake in a place. The city collapsed and the houses were all in ruins. The people lost their lives in their sleep. There were cries of orphan children everywhere. I can't bear to recall the tragedy in the world. This was not all about the nightmare. He also dreamed that the person he missed was buried in the ruins and was badly mutilated. He could not remember where the scene in the dream was, but the bloody color kept lingering in front of him, making it hard for him to breathe. An earthquake. The young man's expression tightened. He comforted him, it's just a dream. Don't take it seriously. Wuxia's lips were pale and he was still in shock. Seeing this, the young man asked the boy servant to start a fire and boil tea for Wuxia to calm down. The boy servant had just started a fire and placed the teapot on the stove. He was horrified to find that the teapot lid was shaking slightly, causing the tea to spill out. Chapter 370. Such a scene scared the boy attendant so much that his face turned pale. He hurriedly shouted, Mister, there's a monster. The boy attendant noticed the unusual movement. The young man and Wuxia naturally noticed it too. The two of them hurriedly ran to an open space. The tremor lasted for the time it took to burn half an incense stick. Is this an earthquake? The young man tightened his cloak. Even though the night was still stuffy, he felt a chill all over his body. Wuxia's face was drained of blood and was pale. It was as if something in his mind had cracked open, causing his thoughts to be empty. When did an earthquake happen in Dongqing? At this time in his previous life he was already in Zhongzhao's Bianzhou. The Wei family of Hejian was weak and could only rely on the Wei family of Bianzhou. He did not want to participate in the struggle of the clan. For the next few years he lived in seclusion and occasionally paid attention to the affairs of the outside world. When the world was in chaos and he was appreciated by the old master, he came out to help. At that time the world was already divided. The 9 states and 5 countries no longer existed. The feudal lords were divided and the power struggle for hegemony was already in full swing. As for Dongqing, he had a thorough understanding of it. He searched his memory but could not remember any earthquake at this time. The earthquake originated from the side of the Emperor's star. He raised his head and glanced at the celestial body. The treacherous celestial body exuded a gloomy coldness, as though it was covered with a faint layer of blood. It gave him a sense of meaning. He pinched his fingers and calculated for a long time before he vaguely calculated that the source of the earthquake was near the Emperor's star. The Ziwei star in Dongqing referred to the Emperor of Dongqing. The side of Ziwei star naturally referred to Shangjing. His current location was very far from Shangjing. It would take 2 months if he rode at full speed. He could feel such an obvious tremor from so far away. It was hard for him to imagine what would happen in Shangjing, which was the epicenter of the earthquake. If he knew that there would be an earthquake in Shangjing, how could he watch that person go to Shangjing? He had to stop it no matter what. Could it be that even the heavens couldn't bear to see him live a second life and couldn't tolerate him? Xixiao, what's wrong with you? Who would dare to go back to the house to sleep during an earthquake? The young man and the boy attendant hurriedly went inside to move some bedding. They planned to sleep in the open space in the courtyard for the night. Everything would be discussed tomorrow. Suddenly he realized that his friend seemed to have lost his soul. King, I'm fine. I just thought of the nightmare just now. That might be a warning from the heavens. He had just had a nightmare and when he woke up there really was an earthquake. Wasn't this a warning from the heavens? The young man looked worried. Dongqing today. How can it withstand such torment? The officials neglected the affairs of the court, and the court was filled with the lackeys of their relatives and eunuchs. Who knew how many people were buried in this earthquake? How many people will survive? Wei Xi's gaze was distant. It was unknown if he had heard his friends murmur. 2 flowers blossomed, one on each side. Jiang Pingji's alertness was far sharper than that of a beast. Half a minute before the earthquake, her nerves were already stretched to the limit. She had never felt so flustered before. Her heart was beating abnormally fast. Stop sleeping. She slapped Fengju's back and woke up the naughty child who was secretly taking a nap. I'm very flustered. Fengju looked at Jiang Pingji in confusion. What did it have to do with him that she was panicking? Do you want me to rub it for you? Fengju maintained a cold expression. The audience in the streaming room burst into laughter at his godly reply. The bullet screen was full of comments from people who felt sorry for the naughty child. He was courting death with such depth. Get lost, who asked you to rub it? Jiang Pingji said rudely. Her rude attitude made Fengju's impression of her even worse. I think something is going to happen. Go and wake Huayu up. Go to an empty place in the courtyard and wait. I'll go to the delivery room to take a look. Fengju's temper rose after being treated so rudely by her. However, Jiang Pingji's actions were agile and swift. She had already gotten up and went to the delivery room. At this moment, the midwife suddenly opened the door of the delivery room and said, Madam is moving. What? At this time? Jiang Pingji was stunned. A strong sense of crisis rushed from the soles of her feet to her brain. She raised her hand and waved the midwife away. She pushed her to the corridor and quickly rushed into the delivery room. The midwife was shocked by her sudden action. She cried out and fell to the ground on her buttocks. There seemed to be a cracking sound at her waist. She had twisted it. In the next moment, the ground shook violently as if the sky and earth were turning upside down. The earth quaked and the mountains cracked. The loud sound of the house collapsing exploded in everyone's ears. Dust filled the air. The terrified screams were drowned out. Everything happened too suddenly. The audience in the streaming room was completely dumbfounded. When they came to their senses, the streaming screen was already in a mess. The eaves suddenly collapsed and fell on the maidservant in the delivery room. Blood and flesh splattered all over the ground. Jiang Pingji's physical potential exploded in an instant. Before the eaves were about to hit Wei Jingxian, Jiang Pingji hugged Wei Jingxian along with the thin blanket. She rolled over and narrowly avoided being hit. The candles in the room had long been extinguished and the surroundings were pitch black. Jiang Pingji relied on her intuition and memory. She carried Wei Jingxian, who was covered in blood, and rushed out of the delivery room. The moonlight poured down and there was light in their vision. The ground was still shaking. Jiang Pingji placed Wei Jingxian on the empty ground and handed her over to the midwife, who was scared out of her wits. I'll go in to save her. You help Jingxian deliver the baby first. Feng Huijie, what the hell are you doing? Hurry up and come over to help. Fortunately, Feng Jin did not like complicated and gorgeous decorations. There was only a small pond in the courtyard. There were no artificial mountains or mountains. The servants who were lucky enough to escape gathered in the open space. Feng Ju was awakened by Jiang Pingji's scolding. He hurriedly came forward to calm everyone down. Feng Jin was extremely tired and fell into a deep sleep. However, he was lucky. The fallen beam did not hit him. It only grazed him slightly and woke him up from his sleep. At that moment, the entire Shangjing city had been turned upside down. Feng Ju covered his injured arm. His face was pale as he comforted everyone. Husband, it hurts. When the earthquake happened, Wei Jingxian had already fainted. The last image in her memory was the beam that fell on her head and the familiar outline. The midwife's psychological quality was good enough. Under Jiang Pingji's tough orders, she helped Wei Jingxian deliver the baby. She pressed on her philtrum forcefully and forced her to wake up. If the pregnant woman did not stay awake at that time, she would die with the baby. Jingxian. After Feng Jin woke up, his mind was in a mess. His heart seemed to have entered an ice cellar. It was so cold that his whole body was stiff. He heard a familiar call in his ear. He barely regained his consciousness and hugged Wei Jingxian, who was covered in blood, tightly. Stomach hurts. Wei Jingxian felt a sharp pain in her stomach. It was as if something hot and wet had burst. It stained the clothes and bedding under her. Waves of intense pain passed through her brain. I'm going to give birth. In another place, Jiang Pingji rescued 2 injured servants and placed them in an open space. The entire mansion had been turned into ruins. There would be waves of aftershocks. She could only try her best. Fortunately, the houses in ancient times were low. Even if there were aftershocks, she did not have to worry about being buried in the ruins. She dug out some bedding and bedsheets from the ruins and threw them to Fengju. Surround it and make a temporary delivery room. Get someone to search the stove and boil hot water as soon as possible. Chapter 371. At that moment, the livestream room was in an uproar. The usual bickering and ridicule were nowhere to be seen. Before a disaster, people's compassion would always overcome all negative emotions. Xianxia Yang Tuo, streamer. You're injured too. Hurry up and stop the bleeding. Zai Chili Diao. Earthquake, it's actually an earthquake. I felt the entire screen shaking violently just now. I hope the streamer is safe and sound. I hope no one dies in that world. I feel my hands trembling even when I type. However, how could there be no deaths in such a large-scale earthquake? Even in their world, when the Luchuan earthquake happened in China, there were extremely heavy casualties. Not to mention in ancient times where rescue measures were extremely backward. In such an era, it was not the end after the earthquake. There were subsequent disaster relief, medical treatment, and disposal of corpses. If 20% of people died in the earthquake, those who could not be rescued in time and were seriously injured would account for at least 30%. That was not all. Wounds would be infected, medicine would be lacking, food would be lacking, and if the corpses were not properly disposed of, it could even cause a plague. Jiang Pingji had no time to care about that. She raised her hand and wiped her face, then washed her hands with the water from the pond in the courtyard. Let's help Xian deliver the baby first. If the others are not seriously injured, let's move out the living items from the ruins. There will be a few more aftershocks later. Be careful. Jiang Pingji chopped the broken beam with her bare hands and inserted it deeply into the ground. Then she spread the bedsheets and bedding to make an area. She made the remaining items into firewood and started a fire. Her calm appearance made the people around her feel more at ease. Because of Jiang Pingji's protection, Xian was not injured. However, as a pregnant woman about to give birth, she was frightened and her situation was very critical. The doctor who was originally invited to keep watch was hit in the head by the falling beam and died on the spot. The midwife only knew how to deliver a baby and did not know how to treat a patient. She had just twisted her waist. Why you stay here with Xian? She will feel more at ease. Huijie, bring the servants to search the surroundings to see if there are any living people. Jiang Pingji multitasked and typed a string of words in the livestream room at the same time. Host V. Is there anyone who is an obstetrician and gynecologist? It's fine if you have experience in delivering a baby or can provide theoretical guidance. Jiang Pingji was a human from the future. Naturally, she had no experience in delivering a baby. Even the doctors of her era did not have it. That was because the baby was not conceived in a woman's womb. Fortunately, the people in the live broadcast room could provide a certain amount of help so that she would not be blind. His luck was pretty good. There were really experienced obstetricians and midwives among the 150,000 spectators. Jiang Pingji ordered people to light a fire and barely tidy up a clean area. Can the child be delivered naturally? The midwife endured the pain in her waist and glanced at Jiang Pingji. She was touching the pregnant woman's belly and identifying the fetal position according to the guidance of the audience in the streaming room. Then she looked at the husband of the pregnant woman, Feng Jin, in a difficult position. It's fine if the husband doesn't mind the bloody scene in the delivery room, but why did he let an outsider in? Feng Jin was comforting Wei Jingxian when he noticed the midwife's strange gaze. He pursed his lips and remained expressionless. In the eyes of outsiders, Jiang Pingji was still a man. Lanting has learned some Qi Huang techniques. Might come in handy. Don't worry. As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Jingxian felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She could only endure the pain and clench Feng Jin's hand so tightly that her nails dug into his flesh. Soon blood started to flow. Jiang Pingji's cold voice came into her ears. The cervix is only 3 fingers deep. This is only the first stage of labor? Jingxian, don't exert force. Huayu, give her a handkerchief to bite on so that she won't bite her tongue when the contractions are too painful. Before the midwife could reply, Jiang Pingji tried to identify for a while and hesitated. The fetal position. At that moment, the obstetrician in the streaming room was giving guidance at the last minute. The other spectators were also anxious, but they knew what was important and what was not. At that moment, other than the retired doctor and midwife, no one else dared to post a bullet screen. The fetal position should be in front of the pillow. As a genetic warrior, Jiang Pingji was very familiar with the structure of living things. Even if it was through the text guidance in the streaming room, she could quickly get the hang of it. Her prediction of the fetal position was not wrong. According to the audience, the fetal position in front of the pillow was usually a natural birth. She could not help but secretly let out a sigh of relief. If the fetal position was not right at that moment, it would really be one corpse and two lives. Looking at Jiang Pingji's very professional manner, the midwife was a little confused. Her job had been taken away by someone who seemed to be even more professional than her. What was she doing here? Feng Jin said, "See if the hot water outside is ready. Clean Jingxian's body first." The bloodstains scared him out of his wits. Fortunately, it was not Wei Jingxian's. Otherwise, what would he do tonight? Cut some of the ginseng that was found in the storeroom. When the cervix is open to the 10th finger, it will be able to give birth. When that time comes, you will need strength. Jiang Pingji wrung the cloth dry and wiped the sweat and stains on Wei Jingxian's face. Although it was summer, the temperature was still very cold for a pregnant woman. There was even a fire in the area that was surrounded. Get someone to wash the cloth with hot water. Cut a few pieces and put them on the fire to dry. There are ruins everywhere. The swaddling clothes that were prepared previously can't be used anymore. Jiang Pingji paid attention to the fetal position and the text guidance of the audience in the streaming room. Before the cervix was open to the 10th finger, there were a few strong aftershocks in Shangjing. Fortunately, Feng Jin had been watching over her. Wei Jingxian's emotions were considered stable. This child was born at the wrong time. Feng Jin's eyes were red and bloodshot. He was usually neat and tidy, but now he was in a sorry state. Suddenly, his meticulous hairpin was crooked and the clean stubble at the corner of his mouth appeared. Hearing that, Jiang Pingji scolded him sternly. "Feng Jin, Feng Huayu, what do you mean by that?" Wei Jingxian was in so much pain that her consciousness was blurred. When she vaguely heard those words, she felt sorrow in her heart. The people in ancient times were ignorant and superstitious. Jiang Pingji was really worried that Feng Jin would be out of his mind and put an ominous label on the child. "Your husband is not blaming the child. Don't worry." He first comforted Wei Jingxian, who had tears in her eyes, and then immediately said, "The child was born weak. He needs careful care to grow up healthily. Now that the earthquake is not stopping, I don't know what will happen tomorrow." He was not blaming the child for being born ominous. He was just worried that the child born under such circumstances would not survive. "Everything will be discussed after the child is born." Jiang Pingji said coldly, "A man should be indomitable. Can't you even protect your wife and child? Jingxian is going to give birth now. Can't you say something festive and humorous? How unlucky." Feng Jin responded with silence. There was another wave of intense pain and contraction. Wei Jingxian could not help but cry out, "Little angel Meng Meng, streamer, that's enough." At that moment, a corner of the rising sun had risen in the sky. The golden morning sun shone on the earth, dispelling the long night. "Jingxian, you can use force. Follow my instructions." Finally, there was a result after a long wait. Chapter 372. Little Angel Meng Meng. Miss Jingxian's physical condition is very good. With proper postpartum care, she should be able to recover quickly. I'm not sure about the child's condition. However, the child was born tenaciously in this world. I think the heavens will bless this little life. After the retired obstetrician and gynecologist said this, the silence in the live broadcast room seemed to have been lifted, and the number of comments slowly increased. Xinshou Yang Tuo. I was sweating the whole night and didn't dare to leave the screen. I never knew that giving birth was so painful for a woman. Just now I called my mother while trembling. I was wrong, I shouldn't have scolded her over such a small matter. Love spicy sticks. I won't hate the streamer anymore. You're really someone who can go to heaven. Melancholy. I've been thinking for a long time after watching the live stream for the whole night. Wei Jingxian was a brave girl. I saw the greatness and tenacity of a woman in her. I thought of my girlfriend who was the same age as her. Not long ago we had forgotten to use birth control and she had gotten pregnant. At first I thought that we were still young and there was no rush to have a child. I planned to abort it tomorrow, but now I want to repent to her, Xianxia Xian. The birth of a new life is indeed touching and delightful, but I'm more concerned about whether I can tip the streamer so that she can buy disaster relief items. In the face of disaster, unity is strength. Saving one life counts even if it's a dimension away. This bullet screen was quickly liked and pinned to the top. Of course Jiang Pingji saw it too. She cleaned up the baby and wrapped him in swaddling clothes to prevent him from catching a cold. She bit her lip. Host V, I'll try my best. After this bullet screen was sent out, the rewards received by the system increased explosively. The previous rewards were all for praying for children or celebrating the birth of a child. The later rewards were all for praying for disaster victims. Of course, there were also viewers who mocked Jiang Pingji for trying to make a fortune out of the disaster. As soon as this bullet screen was posted, it was immediately rebutted. Xianxia Xian, are you King retarded? I've been following this live broadcast room for several years, and I've never heard the host take the initiative to ask for tips or other things. Do you think everyone is as heartless as you? If she's such a person, I'll live stream myself eating my keyboard. De Zhuangzhu's wife. Idiot, I've made the call. Pick it up. Potato beef Gafen. Hee hee, you must have watched too many of those coquettish bitches live broadcasts. Do you think everyone is greedy for money? There was a huge earthquake and so many people died. How could you say such inhumane words? Doesn't your conscience hurt? Jiang Pingji was initially disgusted, but after seeing so many words of support for her, the discomfort in her heart vanished. Just for this, it was worth it for her to shed all pretense of cordiality with the system. Feng Jin and Wei Jingxian's first child was a little girl. Her face was wrinkled and red. She looked like a monkey that had lost its fur. But at that moment Jiang Pingji felt that this child had a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. She handed the child to the Feng couple who were anxiously waiting for her. Give her a hug. She's a beautiful daughter. Thank you. Feng Jin's face was pale. When the child was just born he felt so nervous that he almost suffocated. Now that he was holding this life that was so soft that it seemed to have no bones, his chest was unprecedentedly soft. Lanting, give this child a name. At that moment, Wei Jingxian felt a little better and regained some strength. She looked at her husband and then at Jiang Pingji. How could she not know? Lanting, help me give her a name. Wei Jingxian revealed a pale smile. She was covered with a blanket and there was a fire next to her, which helped to dispel the chill in her body. She knew that if Jiang Pingji had not rushed in and carried her to the delivery room, they would have been sent to hell by the falling beam. Now that she could safely give birth to the child, it was all because of the person in front of her. She was not afraid of losing her life, but when she thought about the possibility of the child being born because of this, she felt a piercing pain in her heart. Jiang Pingji heard the couple's request and was stunned. Give her a name? In this era, when a newborn was born in every family, the father had to wait at the door for the first passerby to give his child a lowly name. Ordinary people had the saying that lowly names were easier to support, but that was the habit of ordinary people. The aristocrats scoffed at it. Since Feng Jin and his wife had spoken, Jiang Pingji thought for a while and said, Huayu's family is not suitable to give their child a lowly name, so I'll give her a masculine name. She'll be called Chongsheng. I hope that she will live a happy life and live a long and happy life. Tongsheng? Hey, that's the name. Feng Jin finally smiled. The child seemed to feel it. She licked her lips and rubbed her head against his chest. While they were talking, the sky was completely bright. The servants who were alive quietly cleaned up the ruins. They were lucky enough to survive, but most of them were buried in the ruins and could not see the light of day. Jiang Pingji lifted the curtain and walked out of the simple delivery room. The midwife, who had sprained her waist badly, was sitting by the side and instructing the maidservants to make chicken soup. There were many ingredients that were beneficial to the recovery of the pregnant woman after giving birth. When the midwife saw her, she quickly asked the maidservants to bring a copper basin. There was a cloth towel beside the copper basin and it was filled with warm water. Langjun, do you want to wash your face? I asked the maidservants in the manner to find the old master's clothes. He hasn't worn them yet. You can change into them and wash the wound on your back. If it's left for too long and the weather is hot, it will fester easily. The midwife looked at Jiang Pingji carefully. She felt that she had discovered a terrifying secret. It was too dark last night and the earthquake happened too quickly. She did not notice the details. Now that it was bright, she stayed by the side and thought about it carefully. She felt that the young Lang Jun was a little strange. After all, she was a professional midwife. She had a pair of experienced and sharp eyes. She could notice some abnormalities in Jiang Pingji's body. When Jiang Pingji came out of the delivery room, she suddenly had an epiphany and woke up. What if the Lang Jun was a woman? No wonder the old master of the Feng family did not mind Lu Langjun helping his wife deliver the baby. Jiang Pingji saw the midwife's expression and suddenly understood something. She wet a cloth towel and wiped her face, washing away the tiredness from a sleepless night. I'm fine. I just need to wear a cloak to cover my wound. Jiang Pingji agreed. Seeing the midwife's awkward movements, she said apologetically, "It was an emergency yesterday. I pushed you away and caused you to sprain your waist. Please forgive me, old lady." The midwife said generously, "A waist injury is nothing. You saved my life. I haven't thanked you for saving my life." Jiang Pingji relaxed. Only then did she realize that there was a wave of pain coming from her back. She twitched her mouth. The wound must have been caused when she saved Wei Jingxian the night before. Fortunately, this body of hers was already unbelievably strong. If it was Lu Shi's original body, the beam that fell on him last night would have caused internal bleeding. If it was more serious, the wound on his back might have exposed his white spine. Now it was just a small wound, which was only a small one to her. Chapter 373. Most of the houses had collapsed in the first earthquake and the rest had been killed in the aftershocks. Wei Jingxian needed post-delivery care, and she could not continue to lie in the temporary delivery room. That was a special situation and naturally she had to be more meticulous. At such a time, tents were far safer than houses. Jiang Pingji said goodbye to Feng Jin. "I have to go back. I don't know how my family is doing after last night's situation. The house and money are secondary. I'm just worried about Xiaoyu." Fortunately, the Lu's property in Shangjing was not big. It was small and the house was low. It was mainly made of wood and there was not much rubble. Even if the house collapsed, it would not kill anyone. "I have to go back and take charge." Feng Jin knew what Suke meant to Jiang Pingji. They were master and servant, but they were actually good friends. "I'll ask the servants to send you back. After the earthquake there will be many mobs. It's better to be careful," Feng Jin said. Jiang Pingji was about to nod when she suddenly heard a familiar sound. She suddenly stood up and looked in the direction of the sound. Huff, Suku was panting. He saw the low-key and luxurious Feng Jin's house turned into ruins. His heart sank. White carried him through the ruins. He saw a familiar figure from afar and his worry turned into ecstasy. Lang Jun. Suku jumped off the horse. He was so happy that he looked like he was about to cry. His face was covered in dust. His clothes were twisted like dried vegetables. His sleeves were torn and his hair looked like it had been bitten by a dog. He looked very pathetic. "Xiaoyu, fortunately you're still alive. How's the situation? Are there many casualties?" Jiang Pingji saw that he was alive and only had a slight scratch on his arm. She was relieved. Suku was not as fast as White. He was still stumbling toward Jiang Pingji, but White was already rubbing her cheek. He took a deep breath and reported, "With White's warning, only the stableman was injured. Everyone else is fine." Jiang Pingji was confused. Only the stableman was injured? Suku looked at White, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Langjun, Mr. White saved a lot of people. Yesterday before midnight, it suddenly jumped up and kicked over the stable. It accidentally injured the stableman who tried to stop it, then it ran into the house and ran around. After all, it was a brave and skillful warhorse from the northern borderline, and it had a master like Jiang Pingji. How could an ordinary person tame it? Almost everyone was unable to sleep because of Whitey, but it was very intelligent. Whoever came near the house would have their heads gnawed off. The group of people did not dare to hurt Whitey. It was Jiang Pingji's beloved horse. The lives of all the servants were not as important as Whitey. Under Dabai's stubborn and willful obstruction, Suku and all the servants could only stay in the courtyard and confront Dabai. Then the earthquake happened. When Jiang Pingji heard this, her expression became extremely strange. "Your hair is so messy. Did Dabai gnaw on it?" She had thought that Suku had messed it up in the midst of the chaos, making it look like a dog had gnawed on it. So it was Dubai who had gnawed it? Suku was speechless. Langjun, it's too hurtful to say such things at this time. Well done. Jiang Pingji stroked White Yi's mane. The proud and beautiful little girl stuck out her tongue and licked her face as if she was asking for credit. Seeing this, the gloominess in Suku's heart disappeared. If it was not on, then so be it. It was better than dying. Last night the earthquake happened suddenly. I ordered the servants to clean up the rubble and search for the people who were still alive. That's why I came late. Please forgive me, Langjun. Jiang Pingji smiled and said generously, you did the right thing. Why should I blame you? When the earthquake first happened, the probability of survival was high. When the aftershocks were over, it would be too late. You know your Longjun's ability. If I can't survive, the whole of Shangjing will be a dead city. You came all the way here. What's the situation outside? If she had really failed and died in the earthquake, what was the use of Suku rushing over? If he had done that, it would have been a really responsible act. In this era, the higher-ups would bear grudges and think that Suku was rebellious. But with Jiang Pingji's magnanimity, how could she blame him? Suku was not an emotional person. However, after experiencing the disaster and facing the strong pressure to survive, he made a choice. Now that he received Jiang Pingji's courtesy, he could not help but tear up. He sniffled and held back his tears. Outside, it's all ruins. 9 out of 10 rooms have collapsed. The people are dead or injured. I'm afraid there are very few survivors. Suku choked. The tragic scene along the way appeared in front of his eyes. His heart was filled with sorrow. In ancient times, the people worked and rested from 9 in the morning to 5 in the evening. The earthquake happened after midnight. At that time, most of the people were already asleep. The earthquake happened so suddenly and the tremors were so strong. How could they escape in time? 9 out of 10 rooms have collapsed. Jiang Pingji let out a long sigh. She sat down on the ruins as if she had lost all her strength. She was a genetic warrior who had participated in the most tragic interstellar war. She had reaped the lives of countless enemies with her hands. Life and death were common to her. In Jiang Pingji's eyes, the ordinary people were no different from the federal citizens she protected. The enemy's life was worthless in her eyes, but the citizens she protected were as precious as treasures. Now this earthquake had taken the lives of countless commoners. Their deaths were worthless. Their lives were as cheap as grass. Langjun. Suku wanted to persuade him, but he did not know how. He knew that his Langjun was usually cold, stubborn and unrestrained, but he knew that he was kind. Because of his kindness, Langjun would personally go to the fields to learn how to farm from the old farmers. He would understand the customs of the fields and crops. He would draw and improve the farming tools. He would not hesitate to spend money to ask the craftsmen to further improve according to the drawings. He did not think that other aristocratic families would lower themselves to do that. Apart from that, there was also a troop to suppress bandits and protect the peace of Hejian County. There was a female troop to take in abandoned and trafficked girls. There were boxes and boxes of books under the ruins. These were the precious treasures she had exchanged with Qing Qing. She was preparing to promote movable type printing in the future and give them to all the students in the world. The 3-character classic, the 100 family names. Those were all prepared for young children in the future. There was also Bai Tan in Chongzhou. She had secretly built a papermaking workshop. She had experimented with many papermaking methods, and the procedures were getting more and more mature. Suku could see clearly why she had done it step by step. She was born in an aristocratic family but did not cherish her possessions. She was a person who truly cared about the world. Suku felt that if such a person could not be called kind, who was qualified to be called kind? Jiang Pingji did not waver for long. She quickly regained her calm and indifferent expression. Open the warehouse, put in the grain and build a porridge shed. Suku knew that his Langjun would do that. He had already prepared a plan. There was a batch of grain in the warehouse a while ago. If we build a porridge shed, it should last for half a month. Chapter 374. How much money is left in the warehouse? I don't know if the medicine shop is still there. Can I buy medicinal herbs? It would be better if I can hire a doctor. She could not save the people who died in the earthquake, but she would try her best to save the people who were still alive. If she had known that the earthquake would happen so suddenly, She would have looked for a doctor when she first came to Shangjing. In addition, allocate some money to hire the people who are still alive. Give them food or some wages. Ask them to help clean up the ruins and search for survivors under the ruins. Go and make a plan and calculate the cost. If it's not enough, Suka didn't need to calculate to know that the money in the warehouse was not enough. Therefore he told her the truth. Langjun, the money in the warehouse is not enough. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and said, I will think of a way to get the money and food. You can do this first. Suka said, if we can persuade the families to open up their granaries, it might be effective. She sneered and asked bluntly, what do you think is the possibility? Countless people froze and starved to death during the snow disaster. How many families in Shangjing opened their granaries to get food? It was an earthquake now. Every family could not protect themselves. If they survived, they would leave the troublesome place immediately. Why would they stay? For the aristocratic families who boasted of their noble blood, ordinary people were like ants. Who would stay in a dangerous place like Shangjing for ants, let alone open the warehouse and give out money, food and medicinal herbs? Suku remained silent in the face of her question. While they were talking, the sound of horses' hooves could be heard in the distance. Upon closer inspection, the person in the lead was the disheveled Huang Song. Behind him were a few soldiers in official uniforms. Brother Lu. Huang Song pulled the reins and stopped the horse in front of Jiang Pingji. Where's Brother Ju? He got off the horse. He could not help but secretly sigh in relief when he saw her pale face and messy hair. She was wearing a loose cloak. It seemed that she was not injured except that she was a little mentally weak. After listening to Jiang Pingji's words last night, Huang Song led his lackeys to patrol a few rounds. In the middle of the night, he even caught two hedonistic sons of aristocratic families fooling around on the streets. He was about to arrest them according to the rules of Shangjing when the earthquake occurred without warning. The first thing Huang Song did was to gather the troops to save the people. He, on the other hand, hastened his horse back to the mansion to take a look. His father had always slept late. When the earthquake happened, he was slightly injured, but his life was not in danger. He was lucky enough to escape. Huang Song ordered the surviving servants to save the people, search for money and food in the ruins, and place the old man in a relatively safe place. After making all the arrangements, he brought people to this area to search and rescue the officials and nobles who were trapped under the ruins. All of Shangjing had been reduced to ruins. 9 out of 10 rooms had collapsed. Along the way, Huang Song's heart sank. Who knew how many people would be left alive in Shangjing City after this disaster? Jiang Pingji glanced at Huang Song and the soldiers behind him. They all looked like they had just finished working at a construction site and were in a sorry state. Huijie is fine, but his arm is slightly injured. He's inside now. Although the inspector of Shangjing was a small official, similar to the head of the city management, there was one advantage. This position had people under him. That's good. Huang Song heaved a sigh of relief. He kindly advised Jiang Pingji, the situation is unstable now and this is not a safe place. In order to prevent the rioters from robbing and killing people as well as robbing food and money, Brother Lu should make plans early. Jiang Pingji frowned after hearing that. She knew what the people would do when they were forced into a desperate situation, but there was a prerequisite. I heard that there are 100,000 Imperial Guards in Shangjing. If the Imperial Guards are mobilized, they can definitely pacify the people at once and save more people. Why would the people need to take risks out of desperation when the Imperial Court has opened the warehouse to release food? Her voice was laced with ice. Her sarcasm was obvious. Huang Song's expression became a little awkward when he was questioned. He said helplessly, when the earthquake happened, the Emperor's family was outside the city to avoid the summer. The Imperial Guards had to protect the Emperor's family, so they couldn't leave easily. Hearing that, Jiang Pingji closed her eyes slightly. Su Ku, who was behind her, could hear the hidden meaning behind Huang Song's words. He almost could not help but step forward to question her. However, just as he took a step forward, Jiang Pingji raised her hand to stop him. The audience in the streaming room was still immersed in the devastation and discomfort of the ruins. When they heard Huang Song's words, they completely exploded. Lao Siji Lianming, what is this? There are 100,000 Imperial Guards. Can't they leave 10,000 to protect the Emperor and the rest to save people? Dais Hajuan, Ba. Why do they need 10,000 to protect people? Who does the Emperor of Dongqing think he is? Ingyang Kuaixin. I've been following the livestream recently. According to the news, the Imperial Guards are the largest armed force in Shangjing. If they don't come out to save the people, are these beasts going to watch the lucky survivors die? Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen from the corner of her eyes. She sneered in her heart. If the earthquake was smaller and occurred during the day, there would not be so many casualties. The emperor would probably be willing to mobilize the Imperial Guards to save people. Shangjing was now in ruins. How could it still be considered the capital? The cost of reconstruction was probably not something the current national treasury could bear. Under such circumstances, the emperor of Dongqing would naturally choose the method with the least loss. Zai Chili Diao. You have to know that in ancient times the lives of the people were like grass. Life was indeed precious, but you had to be a high official or noble. Take Brother Huang Song for example. He brought people to save people, but they were all famous people in Shangjing. The speed of rescue in ancient times was so slow. At the same time, if ordinary people were saved, the officials and nobles might die. Put the two together. Who do you think will be saved first? Waha. I remember the Luchuan earthquake. I was in university in Luchuan at that time. The earthquake happened and the dormitory collapsed. I was rescued from the ruins by a soldier. Looking at this streaming room, I just want to know, if I was an ordinary person, would I be able to live? Beef soup Bujia Jiang. The person above, don't be funny. If that was the case, your corpse would have been cold long ago. You would probably have finished the reincarnation process. Balu Yatang Shizhan Fan. Let's not talk about it. It's full of negative energy. I want to smash my keyboard. I'm going to do something positive to calm myself down. I'm going to post on Baidu and see if I can attract some rich people to reward me in the streaming room. The audience in the streaming room chose to believe in Jiang Pingji with the prestige and credibility accumulated over the years of streaming. The rewards of various amounts continued. Huang Song seemed to have some sources of information. He had a good impression of Jiang Pingji, so he could not help but hint. Now that the emperor can't even take care of himself, Brother Lu, take the opportunity to leave quickly. From now on you can fly freely in the sky and swim freely in the sea. If you're too late and the emperor remembers you and second Brother Feng, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave. After he finished speaking, he resumed his businesslike expression. Jiang Pingji sneered. I Lushi may not have other things, but I still have a backbone. If I abandon everything and escape now, what difference is there between me and a coward? You don't have to hide it from me, Bogeo. I'm not stupid. I know very well that the emperor saw that 9 out of 10 houses in Shangjing had collapsed. He was too lazy to spend a huge amount of money to rebuild the capital, so he wanted to leave with the nobles and the important ministers and move the capital directly, right? Who would spend a huge amount of manpower and material resources to rebuild Shangjing if they were going to move? If there was no intention to move the capital, even if the emperor was afraid of death, he would still send the Imperial Guards to save the people, even if it was just to save face. The dignified capital could not only have the emperor but also the people. Now that the Imperial Guards were grasping tightly and refusing to rescue them, it meant that they were abandoning the people. Naturally, the intention to move the capital was obvious. Chapter 375. Jiang Pingji snorted coldly. I won't leave even if the emperor really moves the capital. Huang Song's expression was complicated. The Jiang Pingji in front of him was completely different from the Jiang Pingji he knew. She tore away her usual lazy and cold facade and revealed her most aggressive side, which made people's eyes light up. He admired this Jiang Pingji even more, but her choice also made him regret. Huang Song persuaded her softly, sincerely thinking for Jiang Pingji. I'm afraid it's not up to you to decide whether you want to leave or not. When the emperor is angry, blood will flow. This is not a joke. If you don't leave now, you'll really be under house arrest in the future. The emperor thought of ways and roundabout ways to control the aristocratic families as hostages. Now that the earthquake in Shangjing was unfavorable to the emperor, he would not let go of the hostages in his hands. If the aristocratic families acted rashly, someone might be sacrificed to warn the others. The earthquake happened not long ago. The emperor could not even take care of himself. If Jiang Pingji packed her belongings and fled through the night, she would be safe as long as she entered the boundaries of Chongzhou. Even if the emperor pursued the matter, the magistrate of Chongzhou, Lu Shi, could shield her. The situation in Dongqing was grim. Coupled with the sudden earthquake, The emperor could not act rashly if he wanted to rule for generations to come. However, if Jiang Pingji did not leave now when the capital moved, she would really become a hostage and lose her freedom. Don't worry, I have a plan. Jiang Pingji looked around. Smoke and dust filled the air and ruins were everywhere. The air was suffused with an aura that made her uncomfortable. I know what you're worried about. Since I dared to stay, how can I not have something to rely on? If the emperor really wanted to move the capital, she would take all the people who remained in Shangjing with her. Originally, he wanted to slow down his pace and plan in secret, going according to plan. However, her opponent's stupidity and suicidal behavior made her unable to tolerate it. However, she was faced with a very awkward problem. Money and food were secondary. The key was the lack of manpower. If it was before Huang Song came, she would have asked him in private if he was willing to send people to help. The Shangjing patrol officer was indeed a small official, but he had a lot of people under him. Looking at it now, it was very likely that it would not be possible. It was not that Huang Song was not kind. He was just doing official business. He could only use his limited resources and energy to help the officials and nobles to complete the tasks given by his superiors. It was several times more difficult for a eunuch to make a name for himself in the court than for an ordinary person. He was benevolent towards the people, but the situation was too harsh. He wanted to help, but he was powerless. If only she had the troops, then she wouldn't have no one she could use. Huang Song saw that Jiang Pingji had made up her mind. He sighed in his heart, knowing that he could not persuade her. Are you here to look for Huaiyu and Huijia? They're all inside. Jiang Pingji had already guessed what Huang Song was here for. He secretly told them to leave Shangjing as soon as possible and return to their own home. Then they would be completely safe. Except while Huang Song had good intentions, the two Feng brothers were not ordinary people. Each had their own opinions. Huang Song looked embarrassed. Seeing that Jiang Pingji was in a bad mood, he could only bow and thank her. He walked past her to look for the Feng brothers. Seeing that Huang Song had walked far away, Suke said, Langjun, Ku will go back and make arrangements first. Alright, you write it for now, Dabai. It's clever. If we meet a mob on the way, it can bring you safely away. Suke took the reins from Dabai and mounted the horse with practiced movements. Thank you. The little girl had a proud temper. If it was not to look for Jiang Pingji, it would not have allowed Suku to ride on its back. Now that Jiang Pingji had given her permission, Suku was not rejected by Dabai. Jiang Pingji waited in the same spot for a while. Not long after, she saw Huang Song coming over expressionlessly. When they passed each other, they nodded and went about their own business. As the patrol officer of Shangjing, Huang Song had an obligation to rescue the trapped officials and nobles and ensure their safety. Jiang Pingji's tent was very sturdy. It could accommodate 3 adults without feeling cramped. Wei Jingxian, who had drunk some nourishing soup, had already fallen asleep in the tent. The newborn Chongqing drank colostrum and fell asleep sweetly. Regarding this, Feng Jin's heart ached terribly. For the sake of this child, he had chosen 3 wet nurses after running around. They were healthy, had sufficient milk, and had good manners. In the earthquake last night, one of the 3 had died. The other 2 had been seriously injured and could not nurse the child at all. However, they could not let the child starve because there were no wet nurses, could they? The husband and wife looked at their crying daughter. Wei Jingxian could only open her mouth and ask if she could nurse the child herself. The child had just been born. When he cried, he twitched. He was as weak as a kitten. She felt sad and uncomfortable when she heard it. Feng Jin's face darkened at that moment. It was not because of Wei Jingxian's suggestion, but because he really felt sorry for his child and wife. Which pregnant woman in a noble family would be reduced to a wet nurse to nurse the child? Wei Jingxian was not the wife of a noble family, but she was the legitimate second wife of the Feng family. How much injustice was it to let a rich woman be the wet nurse and nurse the child herself? However, when Jiang Pingji told him that breastfeeding was better for the child and easier to raise, his expression turned slightly better. However, his mood did not last long. Huang Song came to visit. The news brought by this person made his chest feel stuffy. The scenery in front of him was dark and gloomy. He almost choked on blood. Ordinary people could not see the trick, but how could Feng Jin not sense that there was something fishy about it? The emperor wanted to abandon Shangjing and move the capital to another place. Huang Song did not stay to wait for Feng Jin and his brother's reply. Time was of the essence now. They could not delay it even for a moment. He wished he could have thousands of incarnations. To be able to find time to inform Feng Ju at such a time, it was obvious that he really regarded Feng Ju as a close friend. Lanting, why are you back? Feng Jin heard the movement and looked up. He saw the person who had come. It was Jiang Pingji who had bid farewell before. I met Bogeo on the way. I'm afraid the emperor is going to abandon Shangjing and move the capital with his people. Feng Jin forced the corner of his mouth to twitch. Jiang Pingji's thoughts coincided with his. Now there were two paths in front of him. First, he could do nothing. He could wait for the emperor to send someone to pick him up and continue to be a hostage of the Feng family. However, Feng Jin was not an ordinary person. How could he not see how dangerous this path was? It was not jail, but it was worse than jail. When he arrived at the place where the capital was moved, he was afraid that he would become a real prisoner. Second, he could take the opportunity to pack up his belongings and escape with his wife and child. If Xianxia had not yet given birth and was still pregnant, he could try the second path. However, fate made a fool of him. Now that the child had just been born, he could not endure the fatigue of the long journey, not to mention the unknown dangers on the road. Perhaps he would encounter bandits who had no choice but to become bandits. Or perhaps he would encounter a starving mob. No matter which one it was, he could not afford to take the risk. In comparison, the first path was safer. Feng Jin was a true gentleman. For the sake of his wife and daughter, he was willing to sacrifice his temporary freedom to protect his family. Chapter 376. Why you, she said, interrupting Feng Jin's thoughts. Help me. Feng Jin's heart trembled. What do you need me for? Just tell me. Speaking of which, they were not only best friends. Lanting had saved his and his family's lives. I want to stay in Shangjing. As soon as she opened her mouth, Feng Jin said decisively, No, you should leave as soon as possible. He did not want his wife and daughter to be implicated. He had no choice but to choose a safer plan, but Jiang Pingji was different. It was good enough that she did not provoke bandits and mobs. Her safety was guaranteed. She had a high chance of leaving Shangjing for Chongzhou. Listen to me first. Go on, I'm listening. Feng Jin calmed his emotions. Jiang Pingji said, You saw it too. The emperor wants to give up on the people of Shangjing and choose to move the capital. The imperial guards are his lifeline. He won't let them go easily. We can't expect him to suddenly repent and become a king who loves the people like his own children. Have you thought about how the surviving people of Shangjing will live if we don't do anything? So, I want to stay and help them. If the Dongqing emperor wanted to move the capital, she would move the surviving people of Shangjing. Feng Jin sighed and poured cold water on her. Lanting, I know you are kind and virtuous, but you can't do it alone. What about the manpower needed to save the people? What about the food that the surviving people needed? What about the medicine needed to treat the wounded? That was only the most basic requirement. What about the dead people's bodies? It was summer and the corpses were rotting quickly. If they were not handled properly, it would lead to the spread of the plague. If the plague appeared, there would be a large number of patients. They did not have a doctor who could treat the plague. Most of the people in the world were fools. They were easily bewitched. Even if Jiang Pingji was dedicated to the people, there would always be people who liked to cause trouble. They could not wait for the food to be distributed, or they criticized her for not doing a good job. They liked to kill and rob. How could they be suppressed? Even if the above problems were solved, how would she settle the people who were saved? Shangjing was in ruins. The people were homeless. Even the emperor was troubled by this mess. She had the guts to take over? Feng Jin did not know what to say to her. I can do it, Jiang Pingji said plainly. Feng Jin suppressed the inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. He looked sharply into Jiang Pingji's eyes. His voice was hoarse and his breathing was heavy. You're just a commoner, you can't shoulder such a huge responsibility. If you want to save him, you must take care of everything. Have you thought about how to end this? The emperor of Dongqing had given up on the people and chosen to move the capital. She, as a commoner, dared to go against him. She must be tired of living. I know how to end this. Jiang Pingji was as still as a mountain. Her expression did not change at all. Shangjing City is uninhabitable now. It will take a lot of energy and manpower to rebuild it. Based on the scale of this earthquake, it was likely that it would not only affect Shangyang County, but perhaps an entire province. There is no time to rebuild a home on top of the ruins. So, I want to move them to Chongzhou. As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Jin's expression changed drastically. He flipped the short table beside him. The short table flipped in the air and landed heavily on the ground with a clang, waking up Wei Jingxian and Chongqing, who had just fallen asleep. Chongqing's weak cries were heard, her red and wrinkled little face was steaming, her cries sounded extremely aggrieved. Wei Jingxian lifted the curtain of the tent. She comforted the child while looking at the two of them in fear. Husband Lanting. Did the two of them quarrel? Your husband is fine. Feng Jin was pulled back to reality. His cold expression turned into guilt. He said in a low voice, "Comfort Chongqing. There were aftershocks from time to time. Even adults were afraid, let alone a newborn child." As the father, he could not control his emotions and flipped the table, scaring the child to this extent. How could he not feel guilty and blame himself? Lanting, let's go somewhere further to talk. Feng Jin's expression returned to normal, but his tone was no longer gentle. It was more strict. Jiang Pingji stood up and followed him. The audience in the streaming room was frightened by the aura between the two of them. There was a gap in the bullet screen. Yang Kuaixian, how did the young Feng Jin suddenly become so scary? In an instant, he transformed from a gentle and noble son to a ferocious man. It scared the babies in the audience to death. Beef soup Bujia Jiang. Could it be that the streamer said something taboo and guessed his sore spot? Lao Siji Lianmeng, tisk, worrying for nothing. Feng Jin's thoughts were actually quite easy to guess. The streamer did say something taboo. No matter which era it was, rebellion was not forbidden, right? The streamer just hinted that she did not want to put up with the stupid emperor of Dongqing anymore. She wanted to go on her own. The young Feng Jin received an orthodox education. It would be strange if he could accept it so quickly. Wuxia Guanxian, look at the Dongqing emperor. If he doesn't rebel, he will live through the Qing dynasty? Who's Tiaodong? Even so, there is no need to be so shocked, right? Look at Su Ku, his ability to accept is quite strong. In Yueja Zhuge Qinmal. Tiske, but the problem is, does the young Su Ku know that the streamer is a woman? When the bullet screen came out, countless ellipses appeared randomly, as if they did not realize the connection between them. So what if she is a woman? Did she eat your rice? After a long time, when the audience realized what it meant, they were suddenly speechless. The streamer was a reliable friend in the young Feng Jin's heart. If she was a man, she would naturally be able to show off her skills and plot for the world. After all, the Dongqing emperor was indeed stupid. If he rebelled, then so be it. But the problem was that she was a woman. Feng Jin probably did not have the concept of someone rebelling in his mind. After a while, one of the audience members told the truth. Nu Di Jiwa, why do I feel that? My baby Feng Jin was frightened by the streamer? Feng Jin was indeed frightened. His heart was full of complicated emotions. In the end, he accidentally flipped the short table. Lanting, why did you? Feng Jin's expression was indescribably conflicted. He knew that his best friend was restless and always caused trouble, but he did not expect her to be so ambitious. This is good. Jiang Pingji's expression was indifferent. She threw out an excuse. Can you imagine that one day I will stay at home to take care of my husband and children? I will help a strange man wash his hands and cook his soup. I will be like a helpless little girl to him all day long, like a good wife and loving mother? Feng Jin looked like he had eaten a bug. He said with difficulty, you don't have to say any more. He lacked imagination. He could not imagine it at all. If there was a burly man who was like a helpless little girl to her, and if he felt wronged, he would punch her in the chest. That would be more normal. So I can't live the life of an ordinary woman. I can't be a coward for the rest of my life. I can't marry a woman to hide my identity and then live the rest of my life without thinking, Jiang Pingji said. I am a human first, then a woman. Since I am a human, why am I not qualified to be the emperor? The emperor is not benevolent, the court is not upright, and the country is on the verge of destruction. Why should I be content with an ordinary life? Chapter 377. Since ancient times, when did the sages rule that the emperor had to be a man? Even if there is such a rule, it is a rule. To be a monarch, one must be a human, not a man, and definitely not a beast. Jiang Pingji's words had a double meaning. She also scolded several emperors of Dongqing. Most of the people in Dongqing would agree if they said that they weren't humans but beasts. Feng Jin sighed. You have such a sharp tongue. When it comes to quibbling, I can't beat you. Indeed, the wise sages did not stipulate that the emperor had to be a man. On the other hand, why couldn't women do it? There was nothing wrong with this sentence. To the common people, they did not care who the emperor was. It did not matter if the emperor was a man, a woman, or a beast. They cared more about who could bring them a stable and happy life. Feng Jin was not an arrogant aristocrat. He understood what the common people needed. The ones who truly cared about the emperor's gender were probably not the common people, but the aristocratic families and other nobles. This is the current custom. Have you ever thought about what you would do if your identity was exposed? All the students in the world will write to condemn you. Feng Jin's heart wavered, but he still wanted to persuade her to give up. Jiang Pingji didn't hide it at all. She snorted and said, "The winner takes all." In the future, when he waved his army and chased after the deer, he would kill anyone who refused to submit. A scholar's scolding will be condemned by thousands of people. No matter how fiercely he scolds, it's just a verbal skill. Once the ears are blocked, who cares how he spits? Take life and death lightly, fight if you're not satisfied. It seemed that it was very powerful for scholars to criticize and criticize, but why would Jiang Pingji care about that? Because she didn't care about fame at all. If she died, why would she care about the flood behind her? If you want to blabber, then blabber. Whoever blabbered would be beaten up. Yes, when it came to such matters, she was just that simple and crude. There was nothing that could not be suppressed by absolute force. If there was, he would suppress it again. Feng Jin was silent. Jiang Pingji had said everything and laid her cards on the table. The atmosphere between the two of them was a little quiet. She could only take the initiative to attack. Will you help me or not? You've been drooling for so long. You should at least say something. It's very awkward for me to act alone. Feng Jin looked at her bitterly. Even if he wasn't being courteous, he should at least put on an act. Also, could he reconsider? Help. As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Jin wanted to slap himself. Why did he agree just now? It was as if he was possessed. He had previously advised Feng Ju not to act recklessly, but now he was slapped in the face. He was dragged into Jiang Pingji's boat in the blink of an eye, and it was a boat that could sink at any time. That's good. Jiang Pingji smiled. Feng Jin could not cry in his heart. However, he also knew in his heart that after moving the capital, Dongqing would not be far from falling apart. They didn't even care about the people in Shangjing, so why would they care about the people in other earthquake-stricken areas? Even a rabbit would bite when it was cornered, let alone a living person. After Feng Jin figured it out, he wasn't really against it anymore. Not to mention anything else, just for the sake of his wife and daughter, he had to find a place to settle down in order to protect his family. Jiang Pingji told him about the arrangement that she had told Su Ku. Feng Jin's worries were similar to what they had talked about before. At present, the four things they lacked the most were manpower, money, rice, and medicine. You should organize the people in the residence first. I will ask Xiaoyu to transfer the others over. In short, they had to first set up porridge stalls, organize manpower and the surviving citizens to clean up the ruins, and clear out a place to settle the wounded. The aftershocks haven't ended yet, so we have to ensure everyone's safety first. Feng Jin knew that Jiang Pingji was doing this for the sake of the people. There are only 26 people in Jin's residence, including the guards, maids, and servants. The warehouse has been cleared out, but there are still some meager assets. He pulled himself together and said, "These are secondary. Has Lanting ever thought that if you send troops without a good reason, you will be criticized by others and be suspected by the officials?" Jiang Pingji already had a way to deal with this. If she used it properly, she might be able to get her a decent official position. I want to write a letter to express my feelings so that I have a good reason to send troops. Jiang Pingji said, "The emperor abandoned the people and moved the capital elsewhere. Who wouldn't feel guilty doing such a shameless thing? How will he enter the imperial mausoleum to meet his ancestors after 100 years? I think if I take the initiative to take on this matter and help the emperor cover up his shame, do you think he will be willing? I think not only will he be willing, but he will also be happy to see it happen." Everyone understood the logic. The key was that no one dared to stand up, but she dared. Feng Jin was silent and his mouth was dry. He had to admit that the broad-mindedness and even foresight of the person in front of him were rare in the world. If I do well, the emperor will reward me generously and put the credit on my face to fool the people. If I don't do well, he can push all the blame on me and say that I did not do my job well. He will throw all the baseless accusations at me. No matter what, the emperor will not be at a disadvantage. This is the first point. Jiang Pingji was calm from beginning to end. This was what Feng Jin admired most about her. The second point is that after the capital is moved, the imperial capital will be far away from the three tribes of the northern borderline. The emperor will naturally not have sleepless nights, and Chongzhou will be less important to Dongqing. My existence as a hostage will not be as important as before. The emperor will allow me to stay. Good plan, Feng Jin said. It was a good plan, but in the eyes of others the effort and gain were not comparable. Who would be willing to do that? I think so too. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and giggled. Therefore I will have to trouble Huayu to write the memorial for me. Feng Jin's expression froze. He was dumbfounded. The bullet screen in the streaming room was full of laughter, sweeping away the solemnity from before. Inyang Kuaixin. No, my dear Feng Jin has not completely joined the streamer's pirate ship. Is it really good to reveal your true colors so soon? What if you scare him away? Don't be afraid, capture him. I still have to deal with the matter of money and rations. Xiaoyu is not by my side. Who else should I trouble if not you? Such a matter-of-fact tone made Feng Jin's hands itch. However, she said she could solve the problem of money and rations. It was not that Feng Jin did not believe Jiang Pingji, but he felt that it was a fantasy. Believe me. After Jiang Pingji finished speaking, her expression returned to its usual calmness. Submitting a petition to explain the situation had a high chance of success. Or rather, it was a done deal. The Dongqing Emperor had been wary of Lu Shi for a long time. In the past it was because of Hu County. Now it was because he was the Chongzhou magistrate and was guarding the borders. If Jiang Pingji did well, the emperor could shamelessly steal the credit and minimize the impact of moving the capital and save some face. If Jiang Pingji did not do well, not only would she be tricked, but even Lu Shi would not be able to escape. His position as Chongzhou magistrate would be taken away. This was a huge gamble. In everyone's eyes, she would lose without a doubt. But it was also because of this that she wanted everyone's jaws to drop. System, if you are still alive, say something. Chapter 378. She came with ill intentions. Even if the system was just a bunch of data, it had been with Jiang Pingji for a few years and understood her temperament. Hearing her speak in such a tone, its heart skipped a beat and its nerves were completely tensed up. It deliberated for a while before responding, "What's the matter, host?" Jiang Pingji took advantage of the fact that there was no one around and found a flat spot to sit down. She placed her fingers together in a leisurely manner. Little did she know, the more she behaved like that, the more perturbed the system felt. Jiang Pingji said leisurely, "Do you remember that year when I asked you if popularity points could be exchanged for food during the snow disaster in Shangjing? You told me that my streaming room's level was not high enough. Even if it was high enough, 10,000 points could only be exchanged for a mere 50 kilograms of food. Is that right?" The system was different from a living being. It had back-end data, so it was impossible for it to forget. Jiang Pingji had mentioned it in detail, so the system naturally could not pretend to be deaf and mute. Thinking of the scale of the earthquake, the system felt much more at ease. It could guess what Jiang Pingji wanted to say. "Host, do you want to use popularity points to exchange for food? Since the streamer's streaming room has been upgraded to level 4, the exchange section can be opened. If you want to exchange for food, you can do it now." Greedy guy. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyes and hid the disdain in the depths of her eyes. She had not relented in the past, so how could she relent now? Apart from the 23 million popularity points she had accumulated, the remaining 33 million points in her back-end point account were the rewards from the livestream viewers for the earthquake. This figure was under the premise that the system had already divided half of the points. In other words, since the earthquake, the livestream viewers had gathered at least 66 million points. Jiang Pingji had tested the viewers before and knew the approximate prices on their side. 1 yuan of rewards was equivalent to 1 popularity point. The exchange rate given by the system was 10,000 points for 100 kilograms of food. What did that mean? It meant that 10,000 yuan could buy 100 kilograms of rice. The price of rice on the livestream's side was different. The most common 20 kilograms of hardcover rice was about 50 yuan. Calculating the above ratio, It was obvious how black-hearted the system was. If it was under normal circumstances, Jiang Pingji could pretend to be blind and let the system embezzle her points for profit, considering that the system was still useful. Pigs could only be slaughtered after they were fattened. However, the rewards were used for disaster relief. Jiang Pingji had to keep her promise to the livestream viewers. Therefore, she could make a deal with the system, but the ratio had to be adjusted. Don't you think you're looting a burning house with 10,000 points for 50 kilograms of food? Jiang Pingji's mouth twitched. However, the system said, a transaction is a matter of mutual consent. How can you say that you're taking advantage of the situation? Jiang Pingji secretly twitched the corner of her mouth. She hadn't taught the system a lesson for the past few days, so it was getting cocky, wasn't it? She guessed that the system thought that she could only choose to trade with it if she wanted to exchange for food. That was why it was so stubborn. Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue and intertwined her fingers together in boredom, as if she was absent-mindedly in a daze. Can't the ratio be adjusted? She asked. The system replied, no, this is the ratio that has been set since the beginning of production. Neither the host nor the system has the right to change it. Jiang Pingji heaved a long sigh in her heart. Some people always had the appearance of villains intoxicated by success. After suffering a calamity, they still refused to give up until they saw the Yellow River. It was really annoying. She did not continue to negotiate with the system. Her right index finger swiped through the air and pulled out her own attributes. The attributes panel became longer and longer, and the classification of various data became more detailed. Her gaze skipped over the meaningless content and directly locked onto basic strength. 51 points, strength fusion plus 67 points. When she left Shangjing with Master Yuanjing, she had fused her strength points once, and the system had also upgraded once. After that, she stayed in Langyi for half a year and did many trivial tasks and boring live broadcasts. She fused her strength points again, and the system also, coincidentally, upgraded. After about half an hour, the system took the initiative to ask, "Host, do you want to exchange for food? Do you think I should exchange for food?" She asked with a smile, but there was not a trace of emotion in her eyes. There was still 1,000-year-old ice condensed in her eyes. The system hesitated for a while and replied, according to the back-end calculation data of the system, it is recommended to exchange for food. The earthquake this time had a magnitude of 7.8 and there have been 5 aftershocks. In Shangjing alone, the death toll is more than 30,000. Don't underestimate 30,000. There were about 120,000 ordinary people in Shangjing. Including the 100,000 Imperial Guards stationed there were about 220,000 people. Most of the Imperial Guards lived in military camps, so there were not many casualties after the earthquake. In other words, without counting the number of Imperial Guards, the death rate of the ordinary people in Shangjing had reached a quarter. This was only the confirmed dead. The number of people buried under the ruins who were still breathing was even greater. The system displayed the data, clearly telling Jiang Pingji that if she wanted to be a saint, she should not be distressed about the points. If she was distressed about the points, she should not continue to talk. So what if it took advantage of the situation? If she was unhappy, she could not exchange for food. It was not its fault that people died. Anyway, it had nothing to do with it. Hearing the implied meaning of the system, Jiang Pingji did not become angry from embarrassment. Instead, she revealed an inscrutable expression. The system thought that Jiang Pingji would admit defeat in the end, but not long after, it realized that something was wrong. He was too calm. Could it be that it could not hold it in? Jiang Pingji seemed to be talking about family matters. System, we have been bound for 3 to 4 years, but I don't think I have properly introduced myself. The system felt a little uncomfortable, but it could not tell what was wrong. It could only ask, didn't you introduce yourself? A long time ago, Jiang Pingji did not have a good relationship with the audience in the live streaming room. In order to diss the audience, she had introduced her background. I did introduce myself, but it was not comprehensive. Jiang Pingji seemed to have moved the topic away from exchanging for food, but the system became more and more uncomfortable. She said, now that I think about it, I should seriously introduce myself again. Name, Jiang Pingji. Occupation, Federal General. Gender, female. She is the commander of the 7th Army Corps. She holds 1/10 of the real power in the Federation. I know all this. The system looked patient, but in fact it was already impatient. A hero does not boast about his past achievements. No, I haven't finished, Jiang Pingji said. There is a rigid requirement for the commander of the army. The system said casually, what the hell is the requirement? The development of the mental brain must reach at least the SSS level, Jiang Pingji replied calmly. However, to the system this answer was tantamount to a sudden clap of thunder. It was as if a bomb had blown up its brain. The system did not respond. Jiang Pingji said again, scientists use scientific standards to classify the mental brain. From the lowest F to the highest SSS, there are a total of 21 levels. Every time one advances a level, the mental brain will be qualitatively improved. The higher the level, it does not mean that the IQ is higher, nor does it mean that the development of the brain is higher. It only means that the mental energy is higher. Why are you running? Before she finished speaking, a small source of energy seemed to be peeling from her brain. A pure mental strength firmly imprisoned it. Chapter 379. Jiang Pingji curled her lips mockingly and said, I haven't finished speaking. You're not giving me face at all. The system was silent. If it did not escape now, was it going to wait for death? If it was in a perfect state, of course, it would not be afraid of her. It was as if everyone's mental and brain domain was not 3S. If the mental and brain domain were to fight, no one would have an advantage if they fought with their lives on the line. However, the current, itself, could not be Jiang Pingji's opponent at all. Tisk, why do you think this is necessary? Jiang Pingji said in disdain. Her intertwined fingers returned to a state of interlocking. She still had a shrewd and confident look. I've already retreated again and again. I can't stand you courting death again and again. This time you've really stepped on my bottom line. The system was silent. It tried to break through the mental confinement, but Jiang Pingji did not give it a chance to do so. After trying several times, not only did it not cause any damage to the mental confinement, but it also consumed a lot of energy. The system was too lazy to try anymore. It questioned Jiang Pingji coldly, from the beginning to the end, did you do it on purpose? Have you been fooling me for the past few years? You're too stupid and your IQ is too low, yet you want to blame society? Jiang Pingji rolled her eyelids impatiently and rewarded it with a roll of her eyes. If this time you had a discussion with me about the exchange rate and stepped on my bottom line, I wouldn't have shed all pretense of cordiality. The system was like a sheep. Every once in a while it would keep on shedding some wool. Apart from that, it was indeed a little stupid, but it was easier to deal with such a stupid enemy in the open than hiding in the dark. When did you start to doubt me? The system had always known that Jiang Pingji did not have a good relationship with it. She even suspected it a few times, but the system did not care. It had been through so many hosts and had seen all kinds of people. There were many who were suspicious of it and guarded against it, just like Jiang Pingji. However, people's hearts were made of flesh. After a few years of getting along, which host would not trust it wholeheartedly? Therefore, with so many hosts as a lesson, the system changed its response to Jiang Pingji a little. To be more vulgar, it would advance when the enemy advanced and retreat when the enemy retreated. It would maintain a distance that was neither too far nor too close and use time to slowly wear away the alienation between the two. However, the tried and tested method did not work on her. Only now did he understand that the other party had never trusted him and had even watched his passionate performance as if he was watching a play. Ever since you forced me to be reborn, I've hated it when people make decisions without asking for my opinion. The system was unconvinced. Even if the cross-dimensional transportation fee was included, the price was still cheaper than the hardcover rice in the streaming room. 10,000 points for 50 kilograms of food? Why don't you go to heaven? Even a profiteer would not be so black-hearted. Jiang Pingji looked through the system's contents in disgust. Her mind was carrying out complex data calculations and speculations. She raised her hand to search for medicinal herbs. There were more than 100 types, all of which were low-aged, common quality and common types of medicinal herbs. As for the 1,000-year-old and 100-year-old ginseng, glossy ganoderma, iceberg snow lotus, there was no trace of them at all. She then searched for the zither, chess, calligraphy and painting skill books that the system had enthusiastically recommended. The price had been reduced by 10 times. After clicking on each book, There was an additional large section of instruction manual on the introduction page. Jiang Pingji's stomach churned when she read it, and she almost vomited from disgust. Zither skills, advanced level. Price: 100,000 points of popularity. Description: this skill has been refined by the 3rd generation host XXX, the 5th generation host YI, the 6th generation host ZZZ. It has already reached the advanced level. After buying the skill book, one can obtain the soul fragments of several predecessors after learning it. One can learn it quickly. The first part was all nonsense and the last part was the most horrifying. System, you were so good to your previous hosts. You exploited them when they were alive, made them work for free, and finally took back their souls to recycle and make use of them to create the so-called accelerated skill book. You really made the best use of everything. Jiang Pingji had just crossed over and it was difficult for her to write with a brush, so the system recommended this skill book to her. At that time she did not trust the system. She did not care for such accelerated things, so she rejected it. Now that she looked back, her rejection was brilliant. The so-called accelerated skill book was nothing more than forcefully absorbing the soul fragments of an unknown number of people to achieve the accelerated effect. These soul fragments were all the soul fragments of the previous hosts of the system, and they were controlled by the system. Chapter 380. In the face of Jiang Pingji's reprimand, the system looked like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. It could not self-destruct or escape now. It could only hope to anger Jiang Pingji and make her destroy it. It had to admit that it had underestimated her. It had taken Jiang Pingji lightly because she was a lowly ant. If Jiang Pingji saw through its thoughts and said faintly, "This mental brain domain is your cage. When I catch your main body, I'll deal with all of you together. If I deal with you now, won't I alert the enemy?" Even if the system was just a virtual consciousness, it was frightened when it heard her say that. "Are you stupid? Since my mental brain domain is at level 3S, do you think I can't see that your mental brain domain is abnormal?" The system was speechless when it heard that. It was suddenly speechless. It had indeed sliced itself into two. The main body had most of the energy and abilities, and the part that was separated copied the incomplete data of the main body, forming another palace intrigue streaming system, which was the self that was attached to Jiang Pingji. If I kill you, your main body will detect it immediately. This will alert the enemy. If I let you escape, the main body and the split body will merge, and the level of the mental brain domain will be the same as mine. Won't I create a strong enemy for no reason? Jiang Pingji did not understand. Who gave the system the confidence to think that she could not see through such childish tricks? You be good and stay in the prison. I will feed you energy regularly. I guarantee that you won't starve to death or be full. After saying that, she cut off the channel of consciousness transmission from the system to the outside and isolated its noise. In an instant she felt that the whole world was different. Her ears were completely quiet. Her battle with the system only took less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense. In the eyes of the audience in the streaming room, she was just distracted. Even though she did not have the assistance of the system and had to operate it manually, it was much safer without the hidden dangers of the system. At that moment she realized that many functions in the background of the streaming room were grayed out. Jiang Pingji clicked her tongue and brought up more detailed background data. With a glance, the system changed the initial data and set the sensitive words to completely prevent the possibility of the big shots from the other dimension finding her. If the audience made a forbidden comment, they would be kicked out immediately and their IP would be blocked. Therefore Jiang Pingji could only meet the audience who were watching the show. Jiang Pingji couldn't see the content because of the system's concealment. Unfortunately, even if she imprisoned the system's consciousness, she did not have the authority to change the back-end data. In other words, the live stream would remain the same in the future, unable to level up, unable to update data. A severely emasculated version of the streaming room. Tiske. Jiang Pingji felt disgusted. However, as long as the live broadcast room was still there, she could still see the audience and she could still exchange for the rice that she needed at the mall. That was enough. He comforted himself in this way, but he still felt a little unhappy. However, his displeasure soon dissipated into thin air. Pfft, awesome. Jiang Pingji looked at the popularity points backstage. The total was 111 million. She quickly looked through the back-end data and finally understood where the tens of millions of popularity points had come from. Jiang Pingji put the system's consciousness under house arrest, and the points in its account were directly transferred to her back-end account. The ultimate reason for the system's attachment to her was unknown, but it had a very clear goal: to exploit the popularity points in a variety of ways. Every time it leveled up, the system would take the opportunity to transport the exploited popularity points to the main body. Of course, under Jiang Pingji's deliberate obstruction, the popularity points it could send to the main body were very few. Most of them were saved up by the system through hard work and frugality. The audience in the live stream enthusiastically rewarded the earthquake, and the system received half of the popularity points. They were all newly obtained and they were still warm. The system did not have time to be secretly happy. It courted death and stepped on Jiang Pingji's bottom line. Both parties shed all pretenses of cordiality, and it was unfortunately placed under house arrest. In the end, the popularity points that the system had accumulated during this period all went into Jiang Pingji's pocket. At that moment, Inyang Kuaixin, streamer, are you feeling unwell? Lao Ciji Lianmeng, do you think the streamer is possessed? She was motionless from the beginning, and then she suddenly gestured at the air. Now she's smiling happily for no reason. Of course, maybe the wound on her back affected her brain. Jiang Pingji came back to her senses and her expression became much gentler. She replied to the audience who were waiting anxiously. Host V, ahem, I'm sorry for making everyone wait. I just negotiated with the person in charge of the live stream. Because it's related to confidential issues, it's inconvenient to reveal too much. However, after my argument, the other party is willing to temporarily open a channel to another agricultural dimension. You can use rewards to exchange for an equivalent amount of food and medicinal herbs. However, in order not to affect the dimension according to the rules between dimensions, the variety of items that can be exchanged is limited. The bullet screen this time was probably the most words that Jiang Pingji had ever spoken in one go. When the audience in the live stream heard the news, they were instantly excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Inyang Kuaixin, damn, the streamer is actually an employee of the legendary mid-dimension streaming company? Just like what's written in novels? Wah, just listening to the streamer's words, I feel that it's very high-end and imposing. Motorola, oh my god, is there a streamer like the streamer? The audience in the live stream room had their imaginations run wild. They asked all kinds of questions and Jiang Pingji replied to them all. Host V, I'm not an employee of any dimensional streaming company. I'm just an unlucky person who wandered in time and space. I was temporarily entrusted by someone to help support others. At first, I really didn't like live streaming. I still don't like live streaming after a few years, but I like you guys very much and I like the feeling of chatting with you guys live. As for whether there are other streamers, I'm not sure. So far, I only know that I'm one. After a brief chat, the audience in the live stream room slowly accepted this bitter truth. Yueja Zhuge Qinmo. Streamer, the earthquake this time requires so many disaster relief materials and takes up a lot of space. How are you going to explain to outsiders where they came from? If you don't explain well, I feel that your friends around you will be suspicious. Being a dumb teammate had its advantages. You were full of flaws and blind dumb teammates might not even notice that something was wrong. It was different to have a godly teammate. People who were too smart were not easy to deal with. Once they became suspicious, it would not be easy to dispel their suspicions. Jiang Pingji had naturally considered this problem. Host V, don't worry, sit and watch my performance. If I can't fool them, consider it my loss. Seeing this comment, for some reason, many viewers suddenly began to feel sorry for Suku and Fengjin. She got up and flicked the dust off her hem. Chapter 381. Wei Jingxian was extremely sleepy. Her eyelids were heavy as if they were filled with lead water. Husband. In a daze, she found that there was a breath beside her. The alarm in her mind rang. She tried hard to open her eyes to see who that person was. The figure turned from blurry to clear. It turned out to be her husband, Fengjin. Sleep first. I'll look at Chongqing for a while. Fengjin raised his hand to stop her from getting up. He pinched the corner of the quilt to prevent her from catching a cold. Husband, did you encounter a problem? Why are you frowning? Wei Jingxian turned to look at her daughter who was sleeping beside her. The newborn child's face was red and wrinkled. He was not good looking. However, the midwife who had seen her said that she was very beautiful. After a few days her face would be white and tender. She would look beautiful. Just now I promised to help Lanting. Feng Jin could not help but bend his fingers to touch the child's face. The soft touch made his heart palpitate. He was even more determined in his heart. Wei Jingxian did not understand. Was it not normal for friends to help each other? However, her husband's expression clearly told her that this help might have another meaning. The earth is turning upside down, the country is unstable. The government has the intention to move the capital to another place, abandoning the people. Wei Jingxian frowned. When she heard the second half of the sentence, she could not help but tighten her grip under the quilt. Although she was a woman in the inner courtyard, she was born in an aristocratic family. Feng Jin often talked with her, so her knowledge was not comparable to that of ordinary women. Move the capital? She opened her eyes wide and her sleepiness was gone. So, do you have any plans? You have just given birth and Chongqing is still young. Both of you can't stand the turbulence. Naturally, it is better to be safe. Don't worry, I will arrange everything. Jingxian only needs to take care of her body slowly. Only when you and your daughter are healthy will my plan be worthwhile. Wei Jingxian stretched her right hand out of the quilt and held his hand on his knee. Feng Jin held it back and said gently, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." At this time, Chongqing, who was still sleeping soundly, moved her little fist on the side of her head. Feng Jin saw this and the smile on his face became brighter. "Yes, father forgot to count you in." He poked the little guy's clenched fist with his finger. The little guy frowned in disdain. "Don't disturb her. If she wakes up and cries, you'll have to serve her." Wei Jingxian glared at him angrily. Even the corners of her eyes carried a mature charm. Feng Jin felt a little more relaxed. Even the booklet in his sleeve did not burn his hand. He knew that once this memorial reached the heavens, he, Feng Huayu, would be tied to Lu Shi for the rest of his life. He had a vague sense of foreboding, but he still remembered what she said. The couple talked for a while in the tent until Wei Jingxian was exhausted and fell asleep. Only then did he lift the curtain of the tent and leave. He carefully closed the curtains to prevent the cold wind from blowing in. Feng Ju shouted, "Second brother. Do you have an idea about what happened previously?" Feng Jin's eyes flashed and he said, "I've made up my mind. What about you?" Although Feng Ju was a 16-year-old boy, he was only a high school student in the era of the live streaming room. But in this era he was already a man who could bear the rise and fall of a family. As his elder brother, Feng Jin had no right to interfere with his choice and ambition. The two brothers might not be on the same path anymore. "I'm all alone now. I have no family to tie me down, so I want to go out and fight and see the world." After saying that, Feng Ju looked away unnaturally, not daring to meet his elder brother's eyes. Feng Jin said, "You want to look for Huang Song?" This was not a question but a statement. "Yes." Feng Ju nodded. "A gentleman hides his weapon and waits for the right time. That's all I have to say." Feng Jin was worried about Huang Song, but his younger brother was stubborn and he could not control him. "Then, what about you?" Feng Ju secretly heaved a sigh of relief and turned to Feng Jin. "Your sister-in-law and niece should not be tired from the long journey. They will stay in Shangjing for the time being and observe the situation," Feng Jin said in a low voice. "Lanting has the ambition to save the world and the people. He can't bear to see the people destitute and homeless. He plans to petition for the welfare of the people who died in the earthquake." After hearing this, Feng Ju did not come back to his senses for a long time. Did his elder brother mean that he planned to stay and help Lu Shi? Didn't his elder brother say that Lu Shi did not have that ambition? He wanted to ask more, but when he saw his elder brother's pale and tired face, Feng Ju swallowed the words on the tip of his tongue. As they were talking, the main character Jiang Pingji arrived. "Have you finished writing the memorial?" "Yes." "Take a look at what's wrong." Feng Jin took out the memorial from his sleeve and handed it to her. Jiang Pingji took it and looked at it carefully. She said, "Huayu, I naturally trust your literary talent." When she finished reading, she raised her head and looked at Feng Jin. He was also staring at her silently. Chapter 382. The audience in the streaming room craned their necks and widened their eyes to see the contents of the booklet. However, it was difficult for them to read traditional Chinese and classical Chinese. It took them a long time to figure out what Feng Jin had written. After a while, they still did not understand why the two of them suddenly looked at each other in silence. They could only pretend to comment vaguely. In Yang Kuai-Xin. Young Feng Jin's handwriting is really nice. There are no typos. Linglong Mibao # despise. Even if he wrote wrongly, you wouldn't be able to recognize his handwriting, would you? Sans Hisong Xianxia. Is there anyone in the streaming room who can explain? I'm so confused. I don't understand at all. It turns out that there are all kinds of birds in a big forest and there are many great people who can dive. Wikai Guo Fengxiu. Feng Jin's booklet is not difficult to understand. The streamer asked Feng Jin to write a booklet for her to petition and take on the task of disaster relief. The content of Feng Jin's booklet was roughly the same, but the details were different. He added, extortion and blackmail. Extortion and blackmail. Everyone looked at the 4 words and was suddenly stunned. Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu. #picknose. Learn well. Children who cry get milk. He described the tragic scene after the earthquake and wrote about the people's misery to gain sympathy. Then he tearfully expressed his loyalty, hoping to use his meager power to help the people and show the emperor's benevolence. In the end, he complained about being poor, saying that he was born in a gentry family and had the ambition to serve the country, but he did not have an official title and felt that his status was not enough. One had to say that there were enough emotional scenes and the flattery was just right. Young Feng Jin was not as old-fashioned and pedantic as he had imagined. To do Feiqiu, I wanted to criticize the idea above, but since you analyzed it so well, I'll bear with it. Gui Kai Guo Fengxiu. Thanks to my university major, I have no difficulty reading traditional Chinese and classical Chinese. Lao Siji Lianming. Birds of a feather flock together. Those who could fool around with the streamer would naturally have similar personalities. Jiang Pingji originally only wanted to petition and have a good reason to do so. Feng Jin's writing was very likely to help her fight for an official position. Now the people are in a panic and everyone is in danger. If the emperor knew about your sincerity, he would naturally feel that it is rare to have a good official. Humans were most afraid of comparison. After comparison, the better, the worse the worse. If she had a little luck, the emperor would be overjoyed and would definitely give her an official title. Even if it was just an empty title without any real power, it was still better than an empty title. It's an unexpected surprise. Jiang Pingji basically rushed to the front, letting the people who followed behind know what it meant to be born with divine strength. Not long after, they were covered in dust and blood. The original color of their clothes could not be discerned. Jiang Pingji was skilled and strong. Her 5 senses were strong. In addition, she had a strong spirit that ordinary people did not have. She was equivalent to a mobile human search and rescue device. She could find traces of life. Based on the principle of prioritizing rescue, of course, she would first save those with strong signs of life. Bring the stretcher over. There are living people here. Jiang Pingji calculated the collapsed wooden and stone structure. She used both hands to lift the rubble, revealing a figure covered in blood. The wood was ready-made. It was directly taken from the ruins. Jiang Pingji asked people to gather all the furs and cloth that could be found. She asked the weaker servant girls to make a simple stretcher together. It did not matter if it looked good or not. It was convenient to put the injured on the stretcher. Immediately, someone came up from behind and worked together to carry the person out and put him on the stretcher. Jiang Pingji roughly explained to them the points to pay attention to when carrying the person, so as not to accidentally aggravate the injury. Seeing Jiang Pingji save one person after another who was still alive, everyone thought that there were many survivors. In fact, only Jiang Pingji frowned deeply. Her heart sank to the bottom. Too many people had died. There was no time to lament about this. Jiang Pingji could only purse her lips and bear the scorching sun above her head. Soon, bloody blisters appeared on her hands. The bloody blisters burst, mixed with sand and wooden thorns. Her palms looked very scary. The streaming room was quiet. The atmosphere was heavy. No one dared to speak. From a seismological point of view, 72 hours after an earthquake was the golden time for search and rescue. Jiang Pingji had already wasted a lot of time before. Now she had to seize every minute and second. After 6 hours, it was already noon. The scorching sun was the hottest time. There were 230 people rescued alive. Among them, 190 were rescued by the team led by Jiang Pingji. There were only a few living people carried out by the other teams. Most of them were cold and stiff corpses. The area that was tidied up was filled with the strong smell of blood. Chapter 383. Jiang Pingji rubbed her feet on the ground. Then she randomly picked up a tree branch and drew an irregular rectangle on the ground. With a few strokes, she drew a regional map of Shangjing. During her time in Shangjing, she basically wandered around aimlessly outside. She knew the regional plan very well. It would not work if they kept squeezing into one area for the search and rescue. It would only waste time. Most of the areas outside could not be taken care of. Including the available personnel from the 2 residences and the young men hired, the entire search and rescue team had 71 people. She already had a plan in her mind on how to maximize the efficiency of these people. There are still too few people. Feng Jin's face was pale. There were only a few dozen people. They could not even cover the eastern part of the city. We'll do our best and leave the rest to fate. If the appointment from the government came this morning, it might be easier to give some people symbolically. Su Ku was also panting from exhaustion. But when he saw that Jiang Pingji's lips were dry and pale, her sweat had soaked her clothes several times, and there was not a single part of her hands that was unharmed, he did not dare to make a sound no matter how tired he was. He swallowed his words back into his stomach. It will be night in another 6 to 8 hours. This is the tricky part. Jiang Pingji's voice was hoarse. She spoke of the difficult problem that the 2 beside her could not bear to speak of. The lighting facilities in ancient times were too backward. The rich could use candles to make fire, the slightly poorer used oil lamps, and the poor would wash up and sleep at night. It was conceivable that after an earthquake, there would be a huge impact on the search and rescue if there were no lighting facilities at night. It could be said that apart from Jiang Pingji, the others were basically useless. The only thing to be thankful for was that it was summer and the sky would turn dark later. Feng Jin said, "We have to save them even if we have to hold candles. Human life is as important as the sky. How can mere candles compare to it?" Rich families needed candles a lot. Therefore, the candles found in the storerooms of the 2 residences could barely make up a box. It was estimated that it could last for 1 night. However, how could the light of candles compare to the blazing sun? It would definitely bring great inconvenience to the rescue. Jiang Pingji raised her hand to rub between her eyebrows. She did not know how many bloody blisters had formed on her palm and how many had burst. Others felt that her hand was in pain just by looking at it. She was indifferent, as if she could not feel the pain. "Let's call it a day. Arrange for people to take turns to rest. We still have work to do at night." There were only so many people and not everyone was as tireless as she was. They could not withstand the high-intensity search and rescue that lasted day and night. Jiang Pingji missed her troops again. After all, they were well-trained and had much stronger stamina than ordinary people. "I'm thinking how good it would be if the troops could land now." She smiled bitterly and took a bowl of warm water from Takshu. She raised her head and poured it into her mouth. She gulped it down and felt that it was not enough, so she asked Takshu to get her another bowl. "If that's the case, Langjun, then I wish I had the ability to turn beans into soldiers." Suku tried to find joy in his misery. He held a bowl of porridge and gulped it down. He no longer cared about his gentlemanly demeanor. Feng Jin sighed and ate a simple bowl of porridge. His stomach was half full. Jin will go and take a look at Madam. Now he was most concerned about his wife and daughter. Jiang Pingji gave up her own carriage. It was spacious inside and everything was in order. In addition, the shock absorption system was good. As long as there was a thick mattress and quilt, even if there was an aftershock, Wei Jingxian would not feel a strong tremor while lying in the carriage. Since she was pregnant and needed to breastfeed the child, it was natural to give her a special treatment. The food in the mouth was to restore vitality and stimulate the production of breast milk. No one could let the mother and daughter go hungry. Because there were too many injured, almost all of them were bloody. The air was filled with a strong smell of blood. The pregnant woman could not stand such stimulation. The carriage was tightly packed and it was too stuffy. She asked the maid to soak a cloth with warm water and tighten it to wipe her sweat. Only then could she feel a little better. Thinking of the poor conditions, Feng Jin only felt guilty. "I can't eat it. Do you want to eat some too?" Feng Jin entered the carriage and tidied up his appearance. He wiped his hands and the skin that was exposed outside. He also changed the clothes that covered his head so that he would not dirty the carriage. As soon as the curtain was lifted, the heat inside came out. Just staying for a while made him feel uncomfortable and sweaty. "No, I ate just now. You're still in confinement and need to nourish yourself so that you don't get sick in the future." Feng Jin sighed and turned his gaze to his daughter. Because of the high temperature in the carriage, the swaddling clothes that were wrapped outside had been untied. She wore 2 small cotton clothes and a small quilt. "It's a little hot inside. Open the curtain at intervals to get some air so that you don't feel stuffy," Feng Jin said. Wei Jingxian said, "I remember. You did a good job as a maid. When you get some air, cover yourself and the child well so that you don't catch a cold," Feng Jin could not help but remind her. Wei Jingxian listened patiently. The relationship between the husband and wife could be said to be advancing by leaps and bounds. Jiang Pingji's memorial was quickly sent to the imperial summer village outside the city. After the earthquake, the imperial summer village was on high alert. There were imperial guards both inside and outside the village. The memorial was successfully delivered to the emperor's hands after a series of twists and turns. The imperial summer village was different from ordinary buildings. Generally, it had to be earthquake-proof. Therefore, even after the strong earthquake last night, the palace did not collapse seriously. It was only for the sake of the emperor's life that a huge, luxurious tent was built outside. Although it was a tent, it was actually not much different from the imperial summer village. Inside, there was still the emperor's office, the study room for meeting the ministers, a place for bathing, washing, and toilet. There was also a huge dragon bed for the concubines. The interior was extremely luxurious. One could not tell that it was a temporary tent from the inside. One would think that it was a luxuriously decorated palace room. The people of ancient times could not explain the cause of the earthquake, so they used their imagination to forcibly explain it. One of the most widespread explanations was the earth dragon turning over. Therefore, every earthquake could be interpreted as a warning and dissatisfaction from the heavens towards the emperor. This was also what the emperor hated the most. Since the earthquake last night, the emperor had been in a bad mood. When he could not hold back his anger, he even drew his sword and killed a few court officials who tried to sway the hearts of the people. On the chaise lounge behind the screen, there was a peerlessly beautiful woman. She opened her eyes slightly and got off the couch barefooted. Her feet stepped on the delicate and soft animal skin carpet. She only had a transparent white robe embroidered with 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix draped loosely over her body. Other than that, there was not a single piece of clothing to cover her body. Her long hair was loose and hung on both sides of her chest, faintly covering 2 dark red spots. Her snow-white skin was covered with ambiguous bruises. Some were deep, some were light, and the traces of old and new were obvious. It did not look like it had been done in a short period of time. It looked like it had been done continuously for a few days. Her steps were light and graceful. Her 2 straight long legs made one's heart sway. One could not help but linger on her chest and triangular area. The woman pulled up her sleeves. Her face was enchanting. Her body was curvy and her full red lips were curled into a seductive arc. She was like a beautiful peony in full bloom. Chapter 384. June, you're awake? Come to me. The emperor had just chopped off the head of a courtier with his sword in a rage. The headless body collapsed on the ground, and the head rolled to the woman's fair and almost transparent jade feet. She raised her eyes and stepped over the head. The soles of her feet were stained with sticky blood that was still warm. As she moved with light steps, small bloody footprints were left on the ground. "Has someone made you unhappy again?" The woman did not comply with the emperor's words. Instead, she had an enchanting smile on her face. Her full red lips made one's throat feel hot. Her delicate body was lying on the chaise lounge not far from the dragon table. Her large sleeves were loosely pulled back to her elbows, revealing her flawless shoulders that were as white jade. She swung her feet. Her jade-like feet couldn't even be held by a single hand. The blood on the soles of her feet made her skin look even whiter. A natural stunner. Countless beautiful scenes flashed through the emperor's mind. The ecstasy of the recovery made his body feel something. He wanted to hold the stunner in front of him in his arms and love her fiercely. He could not remember how many years it had been since he had such a young and impulsive feeling. As he grew older, he became more and more powerless. His temper became more and more irritable. He often abused the beauties around him to obtain pleasure. That was until he met Huijun, the peerless stunner. Huiyun. He could feel the heart-wrenching pain and humiliation as well as the strong love that could not be erased. The love and hate intertwined and made him lose his mind. The emperor did not ask who she was. He directly used force to have sex with her in the cool garden of the imperial summer manor. Similar faces, similar names, but completely different feelings. If Huiyun was said to be a delicate and pure white lotus that was untainted by mud, then Huijun was a flower of hell that was born from raging flames. She was extremely coquettish and gorgeous, and she was like a seductive demoness that would immediately cause one to become addicted to her and find it difficult to quit. Both of them had enchanting bodies, but Huiyun was naturally shy. She always made him feel uncomfortable during sex. Sometimes he had to take care of her body and had no choice but to endure it. However, this woman called Huijun was different. She was as passionate as fire, bold and charming. The emperor always felt that his blood was boiling and his whole body was comfortable. He had regained the impulsiveness and enthusiasm of a young boy. He had feelings for Huiyun. She was the bright moon that he could not reach. She brought him happiness, but also pain and humiliation. As for Huijun, when he interacted with her, he felt as if he had been reborn. Countless pleasures caused him to savor the taste of the marrow, and he was unable to leave. The former could not be separated from the spirit. The latter could not be separated from the body. For this emperor who thought with his lower body, physical enjoyment was more important than spiritual enjoyment. Of course, he only found out that Huijun was actually his fourth son's beloved concubine. When he thought of Huijun and Huiyun's similar appearance and similar names, and that Wang Huiyun was the birth mother of the fourth prince, Wumajun, and the former imperial concubine of the emperor suddenly felt disgusted, as if he had eaten a fly. His dislike for Wumajun deepened. Thinking of this, the emperor did not feel the slightest bit guilty for snatching his son's beloved concubine. He ordered people to secretly investigate Huijun's identity. He dispelled his doubts and doted on this woman to the bone. However, she was not a harmless white lotus but a prickly rose. She was proud and willful. The emperor saw that Huijun was ignoring him. Instead, he smiled and stepped forward. He raised his hand to hold her jade foot and sniffed it with an infatuated expression. Smelling it, his whole body felt comfortable. "How can your body be stained with the blood of a foreign man? I'll clean it for you." Huijun looked coldly at the old man who was half kneeling in front of her and holding her jade foot and licking it. She felt disgusted. Unhappy, she raised her foot and pressed it against his face. Not only was the emperor not angry, but he also smiled and licked her foot. His two hands touched her calf. Both father and son were masochistic perverts. She retracted her foot and sneered angrily, "You don't think it's dirty? Juner's body is clean everywhere. How is it dirty?" The emperor slowly got up. His eyes were filled with strong aggression. He scanned her body. There seemed to be two clusters of flames burning in his eyes. "I am your son's concubine. I gave my body to him first. Do you think it's clean?" The emperor sneered coldly, "You are mine now. You can't think about other men." So what if she was his son's concubine? He had even slept with his brother, the wife and concubine of the former emperor. No matter what kind of woman she was, her careful and vicious nature would never change. In order to save her life, the former emperor's empress had secretly climbed into his bed. She had even taken the initiative to send Wang Guifei to his bed. Now Lu Shi's daughter, Lu Huan, had sent Huijun to his bed for the sake of the status of the fourth princess consort. Moreover, if it wasn't for the fourth princess consort's scheme to push you to my side, I wouldn't be able to have you, right? The emperor hugged the beauty in his arms and said faintly, "How can I not have a taste of a peerless beauty who is sent to my door? I love your little mouth very much." As he spoke, he lowered his head and nibbled. Huijun secretly twitched her mouth. She had thought that the royal family was very honorable. Only after truly interacting with them did she realize how disgusting it was. The emperor in front of her, other than having money and status, was not as good as the guests she had met before. At least those guests had clearly come to visit. Not only did the emperor want to visit, but he also wanted her to fall in love with them. How shameless. The two of them were panting. The emperor carried her to sit in front of the dragon desk. He had to take her with him to read the memorials. Huijun was originally half squinting lazily. She secretly glanced at the memorials and found a familiar name on one of the memorials. Coincidentally, the emperor had also seen the memorials. He skimmed through them. His eyes were dark and gloomy. Occasionally there was a murderous glint. What is this? Huijun did not look at the memorials. Instead, she raised her hand and took the other memorials. After looking at them, she threw them to the side. She looked at them and threw them all over the floor. Her willfulness was a clear indication of her unparalleled pampering. A bunch of useless things. My head hurts just looking at them. The emperor allowed her to throw a tantrum until she took away the memorials in his hands. The handwriting is nice. Huijun glanced at it. She seemed to be attracted by the handwriting and became interested. Sir, please read it to me. It was not a request but a statement of an order. All right, I will read it to you. The emperor smiled indulgently. He opened the memorials with one hand and took advantage of her with the other. After reading it, Huijun said, "What a pedantic scholar. However, he is better than those who annoy the emperor." The emperor said, "This was written by your former boss, Langjun." Huijun's eyes widened in shock. She immediately thought of something. She snorted and turned her face away. "What is it now, my little ancestor?" "I am trying to avoid arousing suspicion." The emperor laughed and said, "Lu Shi is indeed talented. He is also patriotic and loyal to the emperor. How can I neglect such a talent? Juner said that I will give him whatever official position he deserves." Huijun secretly thought of something and smiled charmingly. "Why don't you give it to any county magistrate?" The emperor suddenly sneered and hugged Huijun tightly. He sighed and said, "I like Juner very much." He waved his pen and appointed Lu Shi as the magistrate of Xiangyang district. When the earthquake passed and the people's livelihood was restored, he would immediately take office. Chapter 385. The emperor was happy to see someone take the blame. He originally wanted to give him a title, but now he gave him the position of the magistrate of Xiangyang district. Although Xiangyang district was not rich, it had a vast land. It was just that it was remote and uninhabited. In order to cover up his embarrassment, the emperor specially allocated 500 dawn of grain and 1,000 imperial guards. He ordered his trusted aide Huang Tan to announce the edict. Huang Tan was Huang Song's godfather. Huang Tan sat down and massaged his cold legs. He lamented, "I have to admit that I'm old. The young ones today are really impressive." The earth turned upside down. Shangjing was almost in ruins. The emperor killed an important official in a fit of rage. No one dared to take over this hot potato. Lu Shi's son had the guts to recommend himself. This seemed to be a narrow escape, but at the same time it was a huge opportunity. He thought of his grandson and reminded him, "You should be more alert. Don't cause trouble everywhere." Huang Song rarely had time to rest, but he was lectured by his godfather. He could not help but put on a bitter face. He had a sweet mouth and was not afraid of Huang Tan's years of prestige. He immediately thought of a way to divert Huang Tan's attention. Huang Song got up and massaged Huang Tan's shoulders. He said with a cheeky smile, "From what I see, I'm not old. Those young boys are impatient and have no sense of propriety. How can they compare to me? My contributions to the country and the country are unparalleled." Although this was a bootlicking, Huang Tan had indeed protected many loyal and virtuous officials. It was not that he had a conscience. He was just trying to please both sides. Jiang Pingji was lucky this time. She met Huang Tan, who brought people to announce the edict. If it were other eunuchs, things would not be so simple. There were many tricks. If the eunuch in charge of announcing the imperial edict found Jiang Pingji an eyesore or was greedy by nature and wanted to sabotage her secretly, he would definitely choose the old rice. If he was more black-hearted, he would directly replace it with rice bran. The 1,000 imperial guards could also be replaced by those who were physically weak, violent, and disobedient. Huang Tan liked to be on good terms with the gentry and young people with potential. He would not play tricks in this area. "Only your mouth is sweet. I haven't settled down yet, so it doesn't matter. I can't be like this when I marry Mr. G's beloved daughter in a few days." Mr. Ji was Huang Song's teacher and also a prestigious scholar in Dongqing. Grandson understands. I will definitely not disappoint grandfather's painstaking efforts. After a while, Huang Tan tidied up his clothes and prepared to bring people to announce the imperial edict. At this moment, the golden crow fell from the west. Along with the passage of time, the curtain of night grew darker, and his line of sight gradually blurred. When the last ray of light disappeared from the horizon, the entire land was shrouded in darkness. Xianxia city, which was usually brightly lit, was now pitch black and silent. The warm wind carried the lingering heat through the walls and alleys, bringing with it a rustling sound. From afar, it sounded like the wailing of a wronged soul, making one's hair stand on end. After a day of searching, the number of survivors found had already reached 512, and the search and rescue team had expanded to 123. As for the ice-cold corpses that were carried out from the ruins, there were at least 2,000 to 3,000 of them. They were densely piled up into a pile, causing people's hair to stand on end. This number, for the once prosperous Xianxia city, was really insignificant. It was just a drop in the ocean. Among them, most of the people who survived were injured. Some of their injuries were light, only their arms or legs were injured. Some of their injuries were very serious, with a high fever that did not subside. They were delirious and hovering on the edge of life and death. The maidservants from the 2 residences and the rescued women and children volunteered to take care of the injured. Xiaoyu, bring some people to this place to collect rations at night. Move stealthily. Jiang Pingji passed a map to Su Ku. This matter should be done by herself, but she was the only one who could search and rescue at night. The efficiency of the others was too low. Rather than that, it was better to send some people to collect rations to temporarily alleviate the food shortage and stabilize the people's hearts. Feng Jin saw that Su Ku was so tired that his face was pale and his eyes were still green. He said, "Why don't you leave this matter to me?" "No need. Why you stay here and take charge? I can still handle it." Su Ku composed himself. He knew that Feng Jin did not have much rest during this period of time. He was tormented by his wife's labor, and then there was the earthquake. He did not sleep at all. He was alone now. His wife, Xuanmei, was far away in Hejin County. Feng Jin was tied down by his family and could not leave his wife and daughter at will. It seemed that he was the most suitable person to handle this matter. 20 hours had passed since the earthquake. Jiang Pingji did not know how many survivors there were in the entire Xianxia city and how many people had died in the long wait. All she could do was to search for the survivors from the ruins and send them for treatment. Jiang Pingji held a simple torch. She was not afraid of walking at night, but the people behind her could not. Is there anyone alive? Respond if you are alive. Is there anyone alive here? We are here to save people. Is there anyone alive? The servants behind her put their hands by their mouths. After shouting for a day, their voices had long become hoarse. Their throats were very painful. In order to cover up her abnormality, Jiang Pingji did not stop them from shouting. She only focused her mind and looked for traces of life. Suddenly, Jiang Pingji said in a hoarse voice, "Wait, don't make a sound." She raised her hand and gestured for them to temporarily stop shouting. After one day, these people had already regarded her as a god. Her every move fell into their eyes. Even when the government did not take any action, this person was still able to stand out and not give up even a single life. This made the eyes of some simple and honest men sour. Jiang Pingji listened for a while and found that the source of the sound came from under a pile of rubble in front of her. There is a child crying. Everyone listened carefully. That intermittent crying sound was indeed that of a baby. Jiang Pingji stepped on the rubble. The dull pain from the soles of her feet went straight to her brain. It was very difficult to walk through the ruins after the earthquake. Jiang Pingji's shoes had long been useless. If the audience in the streaming room had not reminded her, she would not have even realized that the wooden clogs under her feet had been completely destroyed. The soles of her bare feet were bleeding and cut by the sharp gravel in the ruins. After returning, she asked someone to get a coarse cloth. She folded it into a stack and tied it to her feet to make it easier to walk. However, there was no time to treat the wound on the soles of her feet. The torn flesh and the coarse cloth stuck together. If it was torn, a layer of bloody skin would come off. You go here and here. Look in these 2 places. Move the rubble away. Jiang Pingji divided the teams. One person held a torch to illuminate the way, while the others buried their heads in work. After a day, it was unknown how much sweat they had shed and how many bowls of salt-mixed water they had drunk. After dividing the teams, Jiang Pingji forcefully moved the huge wooden beam that was weighing down on them. After a day, the skin on her palms was no longer intact. Layers of flesh and blood mixed with dust had accumulated. After moving the last piece, Jiang Pingji took the torch. Everyone looked and saw a woman curled up on the ground. Her legs and femur were crushed by the fallen beam. Only her back was still stubbornly protruding. Her head was against the ground and her arms were folded in front of her chest as if she was hugging something. The blood that flowed from her body dyed the surrounding area dark. The strong smell of blood drifted along with the night wind. Chapter 386. Behind her, a servant asked in a low voice, "Ling, is she still alive?" He seemed to be afraid of startling someone, so his voice sounded cautious. Not only him but the others also reacted the same way. She passed the torch to the servant and said coldly, "She's dead. Help me hold the torch. The child is still alive." The servant did as he was told. He took 2 steps to the side to change the angle of the torch so that the shadows wouldn't block his view. Jiang Pingji went down to the ruins and moved the heavy object that was crushing the woman away. The broken legs and femur were almost flat on the ground. The audience in the streaming room didn't dare to look directly at it. Even the bullet screen stopped. No one dared to talk about it as if they were afraid of disturbing the dead. Jiang Pingji squatted down and tried to move the woman away, but the woman's body was already stiff. She looked down and saw that the woman had made a small space in front of her body and her arms. There was a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes lying inside. Her fingertips touched the dead and stiff skin and she said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." After moving the body away, the woman's body still maintained its arched back, which made the audience's eyes wet. "This child isn't hurt. He just cried for a whole day. His throat is probably hurt. He hasn't eaten for a whole day, so he's a bit hungry." Jiang Pingji examined the child. Except for his weak crying, there was nothing else. It was obvious that the woman had protected him well. Jiang Pingji hugged the child and coaxed him gently. The child was easy to coax. She held him and shook him gently. He soon stopped crying, but his nose was still twitching. He looked very pitiful. The servant looked at the child, then at the woman and asked in a low voice, "What should we do with the lady? Should we bring her back?" "Bring her back. The weather is hot now, so it's not easy to preserve the body. If we keep it like this, it will rot and maggots will grow in 3 to 5 days. The dead are the most important. Bring her back and bury her. It's also considered a peaceful burial," Jiang Pingji answered in a low voice, for fear of startling the child in her arms. The servant nodded and was about to move the woman out with the people around him, but Jiang Pingji spoke again. "Do you know which family this area belongs to?" Jiang Pingji looked at the woman's attire and the appearance of the corpse. He guessed the relationship between the woman and the child. In today's world, if a child who was less than 2 months old did not have the protection of elders and relatives, it was impossible for him to grow up. Even if he grew up, life would be quite difficult. If he knew which family he was from, he might be able to find the child's relatives by following the clues. However, Shangjing was so big. The servants were either brought in by Jiang Pingji or Feng Jin from outside. They were young adults living in the commoners' district. How could they know the news of every household? After asking around, no one could give a clear answer. Jiang Pingji could only sigh and give up. She had a complete map of Shangjing in her mind. She could easily find the exact location of the nearby ruins by comparing the area with the map. "Forget it, I'll slowly look for it in the future." Jiang Pingji wanted to hand the child over to the servants and ask them to bring the female corpse and the child back to the camp. Unfortunately, the child immediately cried as soon as he left her arms. His cries were no louder than a kitten's and he kept clawing at the air with his fists. His yearning look was unbearable. Ingyang Kuaishin, before watching the live stream I never thought that my tear ducts would be so developed. Sans Hisong Xingningshi, I'm a man but I'm crying like a girl now. I'm typing while crying. People will think that I'm crazy. Streamer, this child is so pitiful. Just hug him a little more. If he continues to cry like this, he'll cry himself to death. Chao Laobao Renfu, this isn't the only orphan child. There will be more in the future. Streamer, do you want to build a nursery specifically to take in these children who lost their parents in natural and man-made disasters? In the modern world, there were orphanages that would take in these children. In ancient society, if there were no kind-hearted people, these children would either die of starvation or illness, or they would end up as beggars, struggling to survive. The bullet screen gradually increased and most of the content was heavy. In fact, no one dared to be mischievous at such a time. Jiang Pingji lowered her eyelids and glanced at the child's face, which was red from crying. Before the earthquake, the child must have been born in a wealthy family. The child's mother's clothes and makeup were very exquisite, and the child was also raised to be fair and plump. He looked very pleasing. However, she had never been a person who was easily moved by external things. No matter how miserably the child cried, Jiang Pingji still handed the child over. If she coaxed him, what would happen to the others who were waiting for rescue? If she brought the child with her to rescue, what if an accident happened and she couldn't take care of him? Lao Siji Lianmeng. In fact, it's disrespectful to hold the child and coax him at such a time. Jiang Pingji made the most correct decision, but the child could not understand it now. The servant carried the child. Seeing him crying so hard and thinking of the child's mother, she suddenly became very soft-hearted. Lang, this. Jiang Pingji thought about it, raised her hand and tore a large piece of her outer shirt, then used the clean inner layer to wrap the child. If this did not work, then she was at her wit's end. Miraculously, the child smelled a familiar scent. He cried pitifully for a while, then slowly stopped. He's a clever one. In this family, apart from the child who was protected by the woman, there were two other survivors. One was an old man who, according to Jiang Pingji's judgment, was probably the housekeeper. The other was a woman with a plain face. Jiang Pingji examined her and found that she had enough milk. Looking at her clothes and where she lived, she should be the wet nurse. Apart from these three survivors, the other 17 people were all dead. Seeing the corpses being carried out one after another, many people were already numb to the sight. Continue the search. Bring these corpses back too. Find a place to bury them tonight. It was a hot summer day and the corpses decomposed very quickly. If there was another rainstorm, it was not difficult to imagine what kind of terrible plague would break out when the water source was polluted. The best way was to burn the corpses, but she felt that this suggestion was very difficult to accept. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji knew how to deal with the corpses. She also knew how to make a simple disinfectant. She had taken the time to exchange 1,000 dan of food and various medicinal herbs from the mall. As long as Xiaoyu brought the things back, the piled-up corpses could be dealt with. Let's search over there. Jiang Pingji rested for a while, then stood up and continued to work. On the other side, Suku had also found the grain depot that Jiang Pingji had marked on the map. He also found another place where medicinal herbs were stored. To avoid suspicion, Jiang Pingji exchanged for old rice that had been stored for 1 or 2 years. However, at this time it was good enough to have something to eat. Who cared if the rice was old or new? Move all these into the carriage. But you're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.